They called her Nia, the most devoted priestess the river had ever known. But one night, beneath the moonlight, she crossed a boundary no mortal should ever cross. She gave her heart to the spirit of the waters, a love both intoxicating and forbidden. What began as a secret embrace soon unleashed a curse that would shake her village, tear apart her destiny, and awaken something ancient and monstrous in her veins. From that night forward, Nia was no more. She became Naima, touched by the deep, feared by mortals, and bound to a fate she never chose. Sometimes the most dangerous transformations are born not from hatred, but from love too powerful to be contained. They thought she was just a faithful servant of the gods, but she was becoming something far greater, and far more terrifying. This is the story of how a river spirit's forbidden love turned a humble priestess into the Serpent Queen, a tale of passion, betrayal, and a destiny that no one could escape. Before we dive deeper into this epic tale, we'd love to know where you are watching from. Tell us in the comments. And if you love high-stakes fantasy filled with mermaids, magic, love, and sacrifice, don't just watch, be part of our adventure. Like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful stories, and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we've got an extra special story lined up for you, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. A huge thank you to all our amazing channel members. Your support helps us keep these magical tales alive and thriving. Long ago, before the rivers grew thin and the great trees forgot the taste of rain, there was a kingdom called Kambusa. It lay between rolling green hills and wide plains that smelled of fresh earth after the storm. The heart of Kambusa was the Oba River, a ribbon of silver that wound through the land like a great serpent, feeding the people with its clear, sweet water. The Oba was not just a river. It was a living spirit, sacred to Luma, goddess of beauty and sweet waters. Her blessing made the yams grow thick in the ground and the fish leap willingly into the nets of fishermen. It was said that if you stood by the riverbank at dawn and whispered your wish into the mist, Luma would carry it to the heavens. The kingdom itself was alive with color. In the morning, the market square bloomed like a second sunrise. Women in bright wrappers of red, yellow, and deep indigo spread baskets full of kola nuts, smoked fish, and ground pepper. The smell of roasted plantain drifted from roadside fires, while drummers beat slow rhythms that matched the heartbeat of the land. Children ran barefoot between stalls, laughing, their clay beads clinking around their necks. Hunters returned from the bush with antelope slung over their shoulders, while fishermen came in from the river, their canoes heavy with tilapia and catfish. At the center of it all stood the palace of the Oba, the king. Its walls were painted with the history of the kingdom, battles won, harvests celebrated, rivers tamed. And just beyond the palace gates, where the earth sloped gently toward the water, stood the temple of Luma. The temple was a quiet place, shaded by old silk cotton trees whose roots twisted into the soil like the fingers of wise elders. The air smelled of river lilies and burning incense. Here, the people came to give thanks, to pour libations, and to ask the goddess for her mercy. It was in this temple that Nia served. Nia was young, but her presence carried the calm of someone who had lived 100 seasons. Her skin was deep bronze, her eyes the warm brown of river mud after rain. Her hair, long and dark, was braided and woven with white cowrie shells that clinked softly when she moved. The shells were not for beauty alone, they were an offering to Luma, symbols of the river's wealth. Every morning before the sun climbed over the hills, Nia would walk barefoot to the water's edge, carrying a clay pot. She would kneel, her voice low and melodic, singing praises to Luma while scooping the clear water into her pot. Then she would place fresh lotus flowers in the goddess's shrine, each petal opening slowly in the cool morning air. The people loved her, not just for her devotion, but for her kindness. If a fisherman's net tore, she would mend it with her own hands. If a child cried by the riverbank, she would tell them old stories of water spirits and floating cities until the tears dried. The elders would say, Nia's heart is like the Oba River, it flows to all who thirst. One bright morning, as the market bustled and drums rolled in the distance, an old woman named Mama Folu approached Nia at the temple steps. Her back was bent with years, but her eyes were sharp. Nia, Mama Folu said, leaning on her carved walking stick, the festival of the sweet waters is near. Luma will be watching closely. You must lead the prayers this year. Nia bowed her head. It will be my honor, Mama. I will prepare the offerings. The old woman smiled, though her gaze drifted to the shimmering water of the Oba. For a heartbeat, her face tightened with something like worry. "Child," she said softly, "remember, beauty draws both blessings and danger. The river sees all." Nia nodded, though she did not yet understand the weight in Mama Folu's words. She only knew that her life belonged to the goddess, and that nothing could shake the peace she felt when she knelt by the Oba's waters. Far out in the river, hidden beneath the rippling surface, another pair of eyes watched her. They were deep as midnight and bright as the moon's reflection, eyes that had seen storms, shipwrecks, and the birth of new islands. The eyes belonged to Baju, the fierce spirit of the Oba River. And though Nia did not yet know it, her life was about to flow in a direction she could never have imagined. The sun climbed slowly over the green hills, spreading gold across the roofs of Kambusa. The Oba River caught the light like a giant mirror, its ripples sparkling as if 1,000 tiny stars were swimming just beneath the surface. Nia was already awake. She sat by the small window of her hut, plaiting her hair in long, neat braids, each strand threaded with fresh cowrie shells. As her fingers worked, she hummed one of the old river songs her mother had taught her before she died. Outside, the voices of early risers floated through the air, women pounding yam in deep mortars, the hollow thump carrying like a heartbeat, men calling to one another as they pushed their canoes into the water, a rooster's proud cry echoing from somewhere near the market. When her hair was done, Nia wrapped herself in a soft indigo wrapper and stepped outside. The morning air was cool, smelling faintly of wet grass and wood smoke. She balanced a wide clay pot on her head and began the short walk to the river, her bare feet leaving quiet prints in the damp earth. As she passed through the village, people greeted her warmly. Nia, the goddess's favorite, called Baba Kemi, an old fisherman, grinning with toothless gums. "May Luma's blessing never leave your hands," shouted a young mother with a baby tied to her back. Nia smiled at each of them, answering with a soft, "And may the river carry your troubles away." At the water's edge, the world felt quieter. The thick reeds rustled in the breeze, and dragonflies darted over the surface like tiny living jewels. Nia knelt at the shore and set her pot down. She dipped her fingers into the river, feeling the cool rush slide over her skin. "Luma," she whispered, "I bring you my voice and my hands this morning. Let them serve you as the water serves the land." She began to sing, a slow, lilting hymn in the old tongue, words as smooth as the flowing current. Her voice carried across the water, soft but strong, each note weaving into the morning mist. Far below, in the hidden depths, Baju listened. The river spirit had seen many women before, fishers, maidens, queens, but Nia's voice was different. It had a warmth that seeped into the water itself, making the currents curl closer around her ankles as if they wished to embrace her. Baju rose higher, careful not to disturb the surface. He could see her now, the curve of her neck, the light in her eyes, the shells in her hair catching the sun. He stayed there for a long time, watching. When Nia's song ended, she filled her clay pot with water and stood. The sunlight shimmered across her face, and for a brief moment, her eyes caught the faint glimmer of something beneath the water. A flicker, like the shadow of a large fish, but gone too quickly to name. She narrowed her eyes and scanned the ripples. "Only a river dream," she murmured to herself, but a strange little shiver ran down her spine. As she walked back toward the temple, she didn't see the faint swell of water that followed her steps along the shore, or the gleam of two bright eyes beneath the current. At the temple, Mama Folu was waiting. "Ah, child, you took your time," the old woman teased. "Were you plucking stars from the river?" Nia laughed. "Only lilies, Mama. The goddess will like these." They entered the cool shade of the temple, where the air smelled of incense and fresh flowers. Nia placed the pot of water before Luma's carved wooden image, a tall, graceful woman with flowing hair, her hands cupped to hold an endless stream of water. Beside her feet, tiny carvings of fish and shells lined the base. As Nia arranged the lilies, Mama Folu leaned on her staff, watching her with thoughtful eyes. "You have a gift, Nia. The river listens when you speak. Even the fish stay still when you draw water." Nia smiled shyly. "It is only because I serve the goddess." And then Mama Folu's gaze lingered on her a moment longer. "Still, you must remember, the river listens to more than prayers. Nia tilted her head. What do you mean? But Mama Folu only tapped her staff on the ground and said, come. The festival of the sweet waters will be here soon. You have much to prepare. Outside, the river kept flowing, smooth and calm. But deep within its heart, Baju drifted in the shadows, thinking of the priestess with the shell-woven hair, and how her life was already drifting toward his. The day of the festival dawned with a sky as blue as polished glass. The air smelled of roasted yam and sweet honey cakes, drifting in from the market square. From the moment the first drumbeat rolled across Kambusa, the entire kingdom seemed to come alive. Women in wrappers of gold, crimson, and deep ocean blue moved through the streets, balancing calabashes of offerings on their heads. Men in fine embroidered tunics laughed as they carried bundles of kola nuts and jars of palm wine. Children skipped between them, waving small reed fans decorated with bright feathers. The palace courtyard had been swept clean, and fresh palm fronds were tied to every post. From there, the crowd spilled down the winding path toward the Oba River, where the heart of the festival awaited. At the very edge of the riverbank, under the towering silk cotton trees, the temple of Luma stood adorned for the occasion. Wreaths of lotus flowers hung from its doorway, and strings of cowrie shells clinked softly in the breeze like tiny chimes. The carved wooden statue of Luma herself had been polished until it gleamed, and before her feet lay a heap of gifts, ripe mangoes, jars of honey, cloth woven in river blue patterns, and bowls of steaming pounded yam. Nia stood at the front of the temple, dressed in a new wrapper of deep turquoise cloth. Her braids had been freshly woven with white shells, each one catching the sunlight. The elders had crowned her role for the day. She would lead the kingdom in prayer to the goddess. Mama Folu approached, her walking staff tapping against the stone. You look like the river on a calm morning, she said, her eyes shining. Remember, child, your words will be the voice of Kambusa today. Speak them with a full heart. Nia bowed her head. I will, Mama. The talking and laughter of the crowd slowly faded as the drummers began a slow, deep rhythm. The sound rolled like distant thunder, calling all to listen. Nia stepped forward, the hem of her wrapper brushing the smooth stones beneath her feet, and raised her hands toward the river. Luma, she began, her voice strong yet soft, we thank you for the waters that feed our yams and fish, for the rains that kiss our land, for the beauty you place in our hearts. May the Oba River never run dry. May your blessing flow in our lives like the currents of your sweet waters. The crowd murmured their amens, their faces calm, eyes lowered. Nia reached into her calabash, pouring palm wine into the river in slow, steady streams. The liquid rippled and spread, caught by the light. At that moment, something stirred beneath the surface. Baju had come. From deep within his watery realm, the river spirit had been watching the festival since the first drumbeat. He had never seen the people gather like this, their joy spilling over the banks of his river. And at the center of it all was Nia, her voice threading through the air like music, her beauty more striking than the festival's colors. The scent of palm wine and flowers drifted down into the water, mingling with the pull of her song. Baju rose until his head was just beneath the surface, hidden by the glare of the sun. His eyes fixed on her, and in the rhythm of the drums, he began to feel the first tug of something he had not known in many seasons, longing. On the riverbank, the music quickened. Dancers leapt into the open space, their ankles bound with rattling beads, skirts flaring with each step. The drummers matched them beat for beat, sweat glistening on their foreheads. The air seemed to hum with life. A group of young boys splashed in the shallows, daring each other to scoop water into their mouths for Luma's blessing. One boy suddenly stopped, his eyes wide. Did you see that? He whispered. Something in the water. The others laughed and shoved him, but far below, Baju slipped back into the deeper currents, his mind filled with the image of the shell-haired priestess. When the last offering was laid at the temple and the final song faded into the afternoon heat, Nia carried a small bowl of lilies to the river's edge. She knelt, letting her fingers graze the surface. The water seemed to rise just slightly toward her hand, a gentle swell, almost like an unseen palm pressing back against her touch. She frowned, her eyes scanning the ripples. Behind her, Mama Folu's voice called, "Come, Nia. The feast is starting." Nia rose, but as she turned away, the water stilled once more. Beneath its calm face, Baju drifted in the darkness, already knowing that the festival had only deepened his desire to reach her. By late afternoon, the laughter of the festival had softened into the slow comfort of full stomachs and tired feet. The market stalls were half empty, their owners lounging in the shade. Drums still played, but now the rhythms were slower, almost like a lullaby for the kingdom. In the distance, the horizon began to blur. A pale haze crept over the hills, the first breath of the Harmattan winds, sweeping down from the far north. The air grew dry, the blue of the sky fading into a powdery gold. It carried with it the scent of dust and something faintly metallic, as if the earth itself had been ground fine and scattered into the air. Nia walked home from the temple slowly, her arms full of leftover offerings to share with her neighbors. As she passed through the narrow streets, she gave a mango here, a handful of kola nuts there, smiling at the thanks she received. But she couldn't quite shake the feeling that had been with her since morning, that odd swell of water against her hand at the riverbank. Her small hut sat near the edge of the village, where the ground sloped toward the fields. The roof of woven palm fronds rustled softly in the gathering wind. She set down her bundle of food, lit a small clay lamp, and unwrapped her hair. The shells clicked against each other, the sound oddly loud in the quiet. Outside, the Harmattan whispered along the walls, carrying dust through the cracks. Nia moved to the doorway and looked out. The village lay under a strange half-light, the air thick and dry, as though the day were holding its breath. In the far distance, the Oba River shimmered faintly, a silver thread in the dimness. She shivered and stepped back inside, pulling her wrapper tighter. Just the wind, she told herself, though her voice didn't sound entirely sure. Far away, in the dark belly of the river, Baju stirred. The Harmattan night was his favorite, the dry air above meant fewer fishermen, fewer canoes to disturb his thoughts. The river ran deep and still, its surface a perfect mirror for the stars. He floated in the cool silence, but his mind was far from calm. All day he had thought of the priestess, her voice, her hands, the way her hair had caught the sunlight. He had admired women before, from a distance. But Nia was different. There was a softness in her that felt like water finding its way through stone, patient, steady, and impossible to stop. He told himself he only wanted to see her again, to hear her speak when the crowd was gone. Yet something deeper swirled within him, something older than the river's current. As the moon climbed into the night sky, Baju began to move. The river barely rippled as he rose, his long form slicing through the water like a shadow. He passed over beds of lilies, under the arching roots of mangrove trees, until he reached the point where the river's edge met the dark fields near Nia's hut. Above, Nia lay on her sleeping mat. The Harmattan winds rattled the palm frond roof. She turned onto her side, watching the flicker of her lamp. Her thoughts drifted toward the festival, the faces of the people, the taste of sweet palm wine, and then, unbidden, the memory of that strange swell of water at her fingertips. Outside, the night grew very still. The first thing she noticed was the sound, or rather, the lack of it. The wind had fallen silent, and even the crickets seemed to have paused their song. Then came the faintest splash, so light it might have been a fish leaping far away. But the splash was followed by another, closer. Nia sat up, listening. At the edge of the field, where the moonlight pooled in the grass, a shadow seemed to shift. It was not the shape of a man, nor an animal she knew. It was tall, fluid, and moved as though it carried the rhythm of the river within it. Baju stepped into the moonlight. His form was both man and spirit, skin the deep bronze of wet river stone, hair flowing like strands of dark water, eyes glowing faintly silver. He moved with the grace of a current, each step as silent as the turning tide. Nia's heart pounded. She rose slowly, unsure if she was dreaming. Who are you?" The spirit tilted his head, and his voice, when it came, was low and resonant, like the echo of a drum struck underwater. "I am Baju, and I have watched you." The air between them was heavy. Something in his gaze made her feel both drawn and unsettled, as though she stood at the edge of a deep pool, unsure whether to step in. "You should not be here," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "This is the land of mortals." He smiled faintly. "And yet, you have already touched the heart of the river." Nia's breath caught. She wanted to ask what he meant, But the night seemed to fold in around them, the moonlight dimming slightly as if the air itself had thickened. Baju took one step closer, and the faint scent of the river, cool, mineral, ancient, drifted over her. "Let me speak with you," he said softly. "Only for a while." And though she knew the temple's teachings, though she knew the danger in the eyes of spirits, Nia found herself standing still as the river's guardian closed the space between them. The moon hung low over Kambusa, its pale light casting long silver lines across the sleeping village. Inside her hut, Nia's lamp flickered, shadows bending and stretching on the walls. She stood just within the doorway, the Harmattan wind brushing her cheek, and before her, only a few strides away, stood Baju, the river spirit whose name she had never heard before tonight. She felt her pulse in her fingertips. Baju did not rush toward her. Instead, he studied her, his glowing silver eyes tracing every line of her face as though he had been starved for the sight of it. His hair, wet and heavy, clung to his shoulders, dripping small rivulets that darkened the dry earth at his feet. The smell of river lilies and deep water clung to him. Nia swallowed, her voice quiet but steady. "You should not be here. The goddess forbids." "The goddess forbids much," he interrupted, his tone smooth but edged. "And yet the river flows where it will." He stepped closer, and though his feet touched the ground, there was something about the movement that felt fluid, as though each stride was a wave rolling forward. Nia's fingers tightened around the edge of her wrapper. "You are mortal," she said. "And I am sworn to Luma." Baju tilted his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "I am not mortal. I am older than the stones in your temple. Older than the first canoe that cut across the Oba. And I have watched your devotion, how you tend the shrine, how you speak to the river as though it is a friend." His voice lowered, deep and hypnotic. "How could I not come to you?" The words slid into her ears like water through reeds. Nia felt heat rising in her chest and confusion tangling in her thoughts. She should have stepped back, should have called the goddess's name, but instead she found herself rooted, her breath shallow. "What do you want?" she whispered. His smile widened, though there was no mockery in it. "To know you. To stand where you stand. To touch the hand that blessed the water this morning." He extended his hand slowly, palm up, and the moonlight caught the fine scales that shimmered faintly along his skin, not fully human, not fully beast, something between. Nia hesitated. The temple elders had told stories of spirits who lured mortals with sweet words, only to drag them into the depths. But Baju's presence felt different, heavy with danger, yes, but also threaded with something she couldn't name. Her fingers brushed his. A chill ran up her arm, not the cold of fear, but the coolness of river water on a hot day. Her skin tingled where their hands touched. Baju stepped even closer, until the shadows from the lamp seemed to pull around them. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak. He looked down at her, the silver glow in his eyes brightening. "The river knows you now. And once the river knows someone, it never lets go." The silence between them thickened. Nia was dimly aware of the lamp sputtering, of the Harmattan dust swirling faintly beyond the doorway, but all she could truly feel was his nearness. Baju's voice was barely more than a whisper when he said, "Let me show you the river's heart." Her lips parted, but before she could answer, he stepped past her into the hut. The air inside shifted, heavier, damp with the scent of rain though the sky outside was dry. He moved like the darkness itself had made way for him. Nia turned to face him, her own voice trembling. "If Luma finds you here, she will be angry," he said simply. "But she will be angrier if she learns why." Before she could ask what he meant, his hand came up to cradle her cheek, and the world seemed to still. She saw the river in his eyes, moonlight on its surface, currents twisting deep below, and something wild, unending, and dangerous waiting in its depths. When his lips touched hers, it was like plunging into water after a long drought, shocking, overwhelming, but impossible to resist. The wind outside rose suddenly, rattling the roof, as though the Harmattan itself had stirred in protest. Somewhere far above the mortal world, in her throne of shell and light beneath the waves, Luma, goddess of beauty and sweet waters, opened her eyes. Far beneath the moonlit surface of the Oba River, where mortal eyes could not see, the palace of Luma, goddess of beauty and sweet waters, shimmered in an eternal glow. Its walls were formed from pale shells that curved like the petals of lilies, and its floors were mosaics of pearl and coral. Cool streams wove through the halls like living veins, their waters carrying whispers from every tributary, every stream, every droplet that kissed the land above. On her throne, Luma sat motionless, a woman of impossible grace, her skin luminous as the inside of an oyster shell, her hair flowing in black coils streaked with gold like sunlight on water. Around her feet, silver-scaled fish darted nervously. The waters themselves seemed restless. She had felt it. That subtle tremor in the river's current, that faint shift in the song the waters sang to her. It was not the flooding season yet, and no storm had passed, but the river's voice told her something had entered the sacred current. Something that should not be there. Her eyes narrowed. "Bring me the messengers," she commanded. From the shadowed columns of the throne hall emerged two slender figures, their skin a deep, glistening bronze, their limbs long and sinuous. They were her river envoys, half woman, half fish, with eyes as pale as the dawn sky. They bowed low. "Great Mother of the Sweet Waters," one began, her voice trembling, "we bring tidings from the riverbanks." "Speak," Luma said. The other envoy's tail swished uneasily. "The spirit Baju has left his post." At this, a hush fell in the hall. The river currents themselves slowed as though listening. "Where?" Luma's voice was soft, but every creature in the palace flinched. The first envoy spoke quickly, as though afraid of the weight of her own words. "To the village of Kambusa. To the priestess. Nia." Luma's fingers tightened on the shell of her throne. A sharp glitter entered her eyes. "The one sworn to my altar." "Yes, Great Mother." A slow, dangerous smile curved Luma's lips, not the smile of joy, but of cold certainty. "Tell me everything." The messengers exchanged a glance before continuing. They spoke of Baju appearing in mortal form, of his silver eyes watching Nia, of how the air itself seemed heavy with his presence. They had not seen the final moments inside her hut, but the river had carried enough of the truth for them to piece together what had happened. When they were done, silence filled the hall. Luma's hands, so delicate moments ago, now clenched into fists. A faint crack formed along the pearl floor beneath her feet. "Baju," she said slowly, tasting the name like bitterness on her tongue. "That reckless child." Her gaze drifted upward, past the coral archways, to where the faint shimmer of the river's surface rippled. "And Nia, the one I lifted from obscurity, the one I dressed in shells and blessed to speak in my name." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but in the depths, whispers carried like roars. "She has let the river's hunger touch her." Around her, the palace began to stir. The water grew colder, darker. Eels slithered from crevices. The great manatee that served as her court guardian swam slowly into the hall, its eyes clouded with unease. One of the envoys dared to speak. "Great Mother, what will you do?" Luma's gaze returned to them, calm but heavy with an unspoken storm. "What the river claims, I cannot unmake. But what the river taints," her fingers rose, curling slightly as if grasping something invisible. "That I can change." She rose from her throne, her hair drifting around her like a living crown. "Prepare the tide weavers. Summon the moon jelly. When next the Harmattan wind blows across Kambusa, I will send a gift and a curse." As she stepped forward, the palace seemed to breathe with her, the waters swirling with quiet fury. Outside, the deep currents began to gather, readying themselves for whatever shape her vengeance would take. And far above, in her small hut, Nia sat on her sleeping mat, her fingers brushing her lips as if trying to hold onto the memory of Baju's touch, unaware that the goddess she served had already decided her fate. The Harmattan wind returned, dry and restless, sweeping over the roofs of Kambusa like a whispered warning. Dust danced in the moonlight, curling between the mango trees and slipping into every crack of every home. The villagers had shut their doors early, for the wind was carrying an odd chill that night, a chill that did not belong to the season. Nia sat alone in her hut, her knees drawn up, her hair, still bound in shells and cowries, spilling over her shoulder. She was staring into a small clay bowl of water, one she often used to read Luma's signs. But tonight, the water gave her no visions. It only reflected her face, pale in the moonlight, and the memory of Baju's eyes. She had not seen him again since that night. And yet, she could still feel him. Her chest tightened. It was not just longing. Something else lingered in her, a strange heaviness in her limbs, a strange heat in her blood. When she closed her eyes, she swore she could hear the faint rush of river water, as though her own heartbeat had taken its rhythm from the Oba River. The wind shifted. The flame of her oil lamp flickered violently. Then she heard it, the faint sound of water dripping. She frowned. There had been no rain, no spilling of pots, no leaks in the roof. But the sound grew louder, closer, as though a hidden stream were running inside her hut. She turned slowly toward the corner where her prayer mat lay. There, on the floor, a small pool of water was forming, clear as glass, growing in size though no vessel fed it. Her breath caught. "Luma," she whispered. From the water, a thin ribbon of mist began to rise. It curled upward, spinning slowly, until it shaped itself into a tall, graceful figure. The figure's hair floated as though underwater, and her eyes shone like the reflection of the full moon on still water. "Child of my altar," came a voice, soft but sharp as a reed flute. "You have been touched." Nia's heart pounded. She bowed her head to the floor. "Great Mother, I have not." "Do not speak lies before me," Luma's voice cut in, quiet but merciless. "The current tells me all. The river carried him to you. And you did not turn him away." Shame burned through Nia. Her lips trembled. "He came unbidden." "Unbidden," Luma repeated, her gaze narrowing, but not unwelcome. Nia looked up, tears glimmering. "I am your servant. I have always been." "You were," Luma said, stepping forward. Her bare feet touched the earth without sound, leaving ripples in the dust. "But you have let another spirit's desire entwine with yours. The purity of your service is gone." Nia shook her head. "Great Mother, please." The goddess's hair began to lift, drifting in unseen currents. "For what has been done, I cannot turn the river's tide back. But I will not let it flow unchecked. The beauty I gave you will be your burden. The trust one placed in you will be your curse." The air in the hut thickened. The lamp sputtered out. Moonlight spilled across Nia's face as Luma raised a hand. "You will keep the gaze that draws men to their knees," she said, her voice like a cold current. "But it will no longer bring them love. Only stillness. Only stone." Nia gasped as pain shot through her scalp. Her braids began to writhe, not from wind, but from within. The shells clicked and fell away. Something cold and slick coiled down her neck. She cried out, clutching at her hair, only to feel smooth, scaled bodies twisting between her fingers. "No, no, please." But the goddess's eyes glowed brighter. "Your beauty will not fade, but it will terrify. Your name will not be Nia, but Naima, the serpent-haired queen." The mist thickened, choking the air. Nia fell to her knees, clutching her head, her tears mixing with the dust. The snakes, her snakes, hissed, sensing her fear. When the light cleared, Luma was gone. Only the pool of water remained, shrinking into the earth until it vanished. Naima lay trembling in the silence. Outside, the Harmattan wind moaned through the village, carrying her first hiss into the night. The morning after the Harmattan night broke with an eerie stillness. The wind had stilled, but a strange heaviness hung over Kambusa. The sun rose pale and dull, as though even it hesitated to look fully upon the village. Naima, did not step outside when the roosters crowed. She sat curled on her sleeping mat, the new weight of her hair resting across her shoulders like a nest of restless spirits. She had tried to tie it back, to wrap it in cloth, but the snakes refused to be hidden. They hissed and shifted whenever she touched them, as though warning her that they obeyed no will but their own. A sharp knock rattled her door. "Nia," came the voice of Mama Saad, her neighbor. "Are you well? The elders asked why you did not come for the morning prayers." Naima's throat tightened. She stayed silent. Mama Saad knocked again. "Child, speak to me." Naima rose slowly, her feet feeling like they were wading through thick water. She pushed the door open a crack. And Mama Saad screamed. It was not the sound of a startled gasp, but the long, tearing wail of someone seeing a spirit. She stumbled backward, her wrapper slipping from one shoulder, her hands clutching the air as though trying to erase what she had seen. What are you?" Mama Saad cried, pointing a trembling hand. Her eyes darted to the snakes, their scaled bodies weaving in the air above Naima's head. Sweet heavens! Her hair is alive. Naima tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. "Mama Saad, it is still me." But Mama Saad had already turned, running toward the elders' quarters, shouting, "The priestess! She has been taken. She bears the mark of a curse." It did not take long for the others to come. Men with spears, women clutching their children, the old ones whispering prayers under their breath. They stood in a half-circle outside her hut, staring with wide eyes, murmuring like reeds in a strong wind. The oldest of the elders, Baba Leke, stepped forward. His voice was low but firm. "What spirit has claimed you, Nia?" Naima's hands trembled. "The goddess, Luma, she came to me. She changed me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Why would the goddess curse her own priestess?" Naima's gaze dropped. Because I was touched by Baju of the river." A heavy silence fell. Every villager knew the name, the fierce water spirit who dwelled in the deep bends of the Oba River, feared as much as he was respected. For a human to draw his notice was dangerous enough. For a priestess too. Baba Leke's voice darkened. "You have broken the sanctity of your place. The goddess has marked you, and her mark is not for our eyes." "I have served you all my life," Naima said, stepping forward, the snakes lifting their heads in unison. "Will you cast me out for what I could not prevent?" But the people only stepped back. Mothers shielded their children. Men tightened their grip on their spears. Fear was quicker than mercy. "You must leave Kambusa," Baba Leke declared. "You must go where the goddess's eyes do not follow, to the mangrove swamps beyond the river's bend. There, your shadow will not fall on our children. There, your gaze will not turn our sons to stone." Naima's breath hitched. "The swamps are a place of spirits and death." "Then they are your kindred now," Baba Leke said. The decision was final. Before the sun climbed high, she was given a small calabash of water, a bundle of dried fish, and nothing more. No one dared touch her. The children watched from behind their mother's legs, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that turns into bedtime warnings. As Naima walked away from the village, the dust clung to her bare feet. The Oba River ran beside her for a while, as though watching. The mangroves loomed ahead, dark, tangled, alive with the whispers of unseen things. When she reached the edge, she turned once, hoping for a familiar face. But the villagers had already turned their backs. And so she stepped into the shadows, the hiss of her hair blending with the rustle of the swamp. The air in the mangrove swamps was thick and damp, clinging to Naima's skin like the touch of something alive. The ground was never solid, her steps sank into soft mud that pulled at her ankles with every movement. The twisted roots of mangrove trees rose like the bones of ancient creatures, their limbs knotted and reaching into the black water. Mosquitoes hummed in endless circles around her head, but they did not bite. Frogs croaked in deep, throaty calls that seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere. Somewhere in the shadows, the splash of a large body sliding into water made her stop in her tracks. She had thought the village's fear would end when she was gone. But here, the fear was different, older, heavier. The swamp had its own breath, its own heartbeat. She could feel it. Her hair stirred, the snakes tasting the air with flickering tongues. They moved as if they knew this place already, as if the mangroves whispered to them. Naima sat on a low root to rest, setting down the bundle of dried fish and water calabash. She dipped her hands into the swamp water. It was warm, and something slick brushed against her fingers before darting away. That night, she found a place to sleep beneath the leaning trunk of a fallen tree. The roots made a low ceiling, shielding her from the night sky. Fireflies floated above the water, their soft green light blinking like watchful eyes. She tried to close her eyes, but dreams came swiftly, dreams of Baju. His deep, voice like rushing water filled her ears, and his hands, cool and strong, held her as they had that night. But behind him was Luma's face, cold as the moon, her eyes like silver knives. The snakes hissed in her dream, and when she awoke, they were hissing for real. Something was moving in the dark water. Naima rose slowly, her feet silent on the damp wood. The fireflies brightened, as if warning her. The water rippled, then broke, and a shape emerged. It was a man. Or rather, it had the shape of one, tall, lean, with skin the color of river clay. His hair hung wet and heavy, and his eyes glowed faintly yellow. His lower body faded into coils that rippled the water. "New queen of the swamps," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I have been sent to greet you." Naima's heart raced. "Who sent you?" "The swamp," he said simply, smiling in a way that was neither kind nor cruel. "And those who rule its depths. Word travels quickly when a cursed one enters our domain." She stood taller, though she felt her knees trembling. "I did not come to rule. I came because I was cast out." The men laughed softly, a sound like water spilling over stones. "All who are cast out become rulers here, if they survive long enough." Before she could reply, he slid back into the water without a splash, vanishing as if he had never been there. The night deepened, and the swamp seemed to listen to her breathing. Naima wrapped her arms around herself. She knew then that the mangroves would not kill her outright. No, they would watch. They would wait. And they would change her. The morning mist lay thick over the mangroves, coiling low like ghostly breath. Naima sat on a root above the water, her legs drawn up to her chest, staring at the reflections below. She had learned something in these past weeks: the swamp was a mirror. If you looked long enough, it did not just show your face, it showed what you truly were. In her reflection, her once soft features were harder now. Her eyes, a deeper gold, flickered like the sun seen through river water. The snakes in her hair rested, their bodies coiled against her scalp, but they stirred when the quiet was broken. A sound came, the faint crunch of feet on damp roots. Not the slithering of swamp creatures, not the splash of a fish. This was human. Naima's body went still. Her snakes lifted their heads as one, tongues tasting the air. She rose silently, slipping between roots and low branches until she saw him. He was a young man, perhaps no older than 20. His skin was dark from sun and labor, and his clothes were the simple wrap of a fisherman. He held a short spear in one hand and a bundle of netting in the other. His face showed no fear, only determination. Naima stepped forward until the water swirled around her ankles. "You should not be here," she said, her voice carrying over the stillness. He froze, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Who's there?" "I am the one the villagers whisper about," she said. "The cursed woman. The one with hair that moves." His gaze found her, and she saw the moment recognition struck. But he did not turn to run. "I came for my sister," he said. "She went missing 3 nights ago. Some say the swamp took her. Some say you did." Naima's snakes hissed, and she took a step closer. "I do not take what is not mine." "Then you will not mind if I search." Her lips curved in a bitter smile. "Search, then. But know that the swamp has rules. And it does not forgive trespassers." The young man took a step into the water. She saw it immediately, the ripple, the faint movement beneath the surface. The swamp was watching. Testing. Before he could take another step, something large and dark moved fast under the water. His spear came up, but too late. A scaled coil wrapped around his leg, pulling him down with a splash. Naima moved instinctively. The snakes in her hair hissed and lunged, biting at the water's surface. The creature released him, vanishing into the murk. He gasped and coughed, clawing his way back onto a root. She stepped close enough that he could see her eyes. "Leave now. If the swamp claimed your sister, she is beyond your reach." He looked up at her, and for a heartbeat, she thought he might argue. But then his gaze met hers directly, and she saw his pupils widen in terror. His body went rigid, his breath stopped. When she stepped back, he toppled sideways into the shallow water, not dead, but still as stone. Naima stared at her own reflection again, this time seeing the truth. Her gaze had power now. Not just fear, but something deeper. Something final. The swamp was silent. Even the frogs did not call. Somewhere, deep within the water, Naima thought she heard Baju's voice, low and approving. The Harmattan winds blew colder that night in Kambusa. The air was dry, dust settling in the corners of every hut, but the warmth of the evening fires gathered people close together. In the largest compound, the elders sat on carved stools, their faces lit in flickers of orange and gold, their voices low. 3 fishermen had returned from the river that afternoon, their nets empty, their eyes uneasy. They brought with them a boy, no longer a boy, but not yet a man, his skin cold as stone, his eyes wide and unblinking. He breathes, but he does not move, one fisherman had said. The swamp gave him back, but it took his spirit. Now the boy lay in the healer's hut, his chest rising and falling like a slow drumbeat, his mind locked away in silence. His name was Osei, and his mother sat by his side, rocking back and forth, humming a prayer to the goddess Luma. Outside, the elders argued. "This is the work of the cursed woman," said Elder Kunto, a wiry man with a voice like cracking wood. "The one who serves no god now. She has made her home in the mangroves." "We do not know that," countered Elder Fola, the oldest among them, his back bent with years but his eyes sharp. "The swamp is full of dangers, spirits that drown, spirits that steal the mind. We cannot be sure. But we have heard the stories," Kunto insisted. "A woman with hair like snakes. Eyes that can freeze a man where he stands. Was she not once the priestess Nia?" At the mention of her name, the fire crackled louder, as though it too was listening. From the edge of the gathering, a younger hunter spoke. "If she is the cause, then she must be dealt with before the river floods again. My uncle says the water runs higher these nights. That is a warning." A hush settled over them. For in Kambusa, the river's rise was not taken lightly. It was the goddess Luma's way of speaking to her people. The Oba River had always been a source of life, for fishing, for farming, for cleansing the body and soul. But when it swelled beyond its banks without rain, it meant something in the spirit world had gone wrong. The elders sent word to the diviner, a thin man with beads in his hair and chalk on his skin. He came with his cowrie shells and knelt before the fire. With a slow chant, he tossed the shells onto a woven mat. The pattern they made drew a sharp breath from his lips. "The one you fear walks between life and death," he said. "She carries the anger of the waters in her blood. She was wronged, and now she wrongs others. Her name is not Nia anymore. She is Naima, the serpent-haired queen." Murmurs spread like wine through dry grass. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men stared into the fire, imagining the face of the cursed woman in the dancing flames. The diviner's voice dropped lower. "If you leave her, the flood will come. If you face her, the swamp will claim more lives. Either path is dangerous." Elder Fola turned to the hunters. "Then we must choose a man not just with strength, but with wisdom. A man the spirits themselves will guide." No one spoke the name yet, but somewhere deep in the village, a young hunter named Tay felt a shiver along his spine, as though something unseen had just set eyes on him. Far away, in the mangrove's black water, Naima sat on her root again, her snakes restless. She could not hear the village's words, but she felt their fear drifting through the night like smoke. And for the first time, it comforted her. Tay was sharpening his spear when the knock came. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor but a firm, deliberate rap that carried weight. He set the blade aside and rose to open the door. 2 elders stood there, Fola and Kunto, both wearing heavy cloaks against the Harmattan chill. Between them hung a silence that spoke louder than their faces. "Tay," Elder Fola said, his voice like an old drum, steady but low. "We need to talk." They entered his hut without waiting for an invitation. The fire pit in the center flickered weakly, shadows clinging to the mud walls. Kunto sat stiffly, his gaze fixed on the spear Tay had left on the mat. "Something is stirring in the mangrove," Folu began. "The diviner has spoken. The flooding of the Oba River, the boy who came back with eyes like stone, all point to the same source." Tay listened without moving. Kunto's eyes narrowed. "They say she was once the goddess's chosen priestess. Now she is something else entirely. The serpent-haired queen. Naima." The name sent a faint tremor through the air. Folu leaned forward, his hands clasped. "We need someone who can track her without being seen. Someone who knows the forest's silence, who can listen to the river and understand when it is speaking. That man is you." Tay frowned. "You want me to kill her?" "No," Folu said softly, "we want you to face her. But to face her may mean to kill her. It may also mean to free her." "Free her?" Tay repeated. "From what?" Kunto scoffed. "From herself, if that's even possible. She is cursed. She brings death without touching. One glance, and the strongest man becomes as still as rock. How do you free such a thing?" Tay's hand went to the small leather pouch tied at his waist, a charm his mother had given him before she died. It was said to call upon the spirit of wisdom, though Tay had never tested it. "What of the goddess?" Tay asked. "If Naima was once her servant, why does she not end this herself?" "The gods," Folu said bitterly, "are not quick to undo what they themselves have done." For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, the wind rattled the reeds on his roof. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then fell silent. Folu rose. "The diviner says the river will rise again before the next moon. If it does, the flood will wash away half our harvest and take the children who play too close to the banks. You have until then to prepare." Kunto stood, his eyes hard. "And if you fail, hunter, it will be more than the harvest that is lost." When they left, Tay sat in the flickering firelight, staring at the spear on the mat. He thought of the mangrove, the twisting roots, the smell of brackish water, the heavy silence under the trees. He thought of a woman's eyes, able to turn a man's breath to stone. And though his heart was steady, a part of him whispered that his life had just been claimed by something older than the village, older even than the Oba River. Far away, deep in the swamp, Naima felt the faintest pull, like a ripple moving toward her through black water. Someone was coming. She smiled without joy. Naima lay curled on the damp bed of her mangrove lair, her serpentine hair shifting restlessly against the hollow's earthen wall. The air was heavy with the scent of stagnant water and crushed leaves. Sleep did not come to her often, but when it did, it came like a tide she could not fight, dragging her into depths she had no wish to revisit. She was standing again on the smooth stone steps of Luma's temple. The river glittered under the morning sun, and the air smelled of hibiscus and freshly pounded yam. Her hands were unblemished, her hair woven in shells that clinked gently when she moved. Around her neck hung a simple string of cowrie beads, the sign of her priesthood. She was Nia again. Children's laughter floated from the riverbank where girls were filling clay pots, splashing each other with cool water. The white robes of the temple fluttered against her legs as she descended to greet the villagers who had come with offerings, kola nuts, smoked fish, and little pots of honey. She accepted each gift with a warm smile, speaking blessings in Luma's name. Then came the voice. Deep. Liquid. Like the river itself was speaking. Nia. Her heart skipped. She turned toward the water. At first, she saw only ripples dancing in the current. Then a figure emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, skin glistening like wet obsidian, eyes the green of riverweed. Baju. She remembered how her breath had caught the first time she saw him. The other priestesses never saw him, only she could. They called her touched by the goddess, but they did not know whose touch it was. He stepped toward her, and the world seemed to dim, as if the sun bowed to let the river have its moment. His voice was low, urgent, yet full of something dangerous. "You are more beautiful than moonlight on calm waters," he said. "Do you not know the river sings for you? You should not be here," she whispered. "Luma forbids her servants to speak with spirits of the deep. Baju smiled, the kind of smile that promised storms. And yet, you hear me. She should have turned away. She knew the rules. But his presence felt like a secret current pulling her from the shore. The dream shifted. The temple bells were ringing, loud, clanging, like warning drums. The sky had turned black, clouds swollen with rage. Luma's statue loomed before her, its carved eyes alive with fury. You have been touched by what was not yours to take, the goddess's voice thundered, though her lips never moved. Nia fell to her knees, tears burning her cheeks. I did not. But the goddess raised her hand, and her hair screamed. It was not a sound made by any human throat, it was the hiss of 1,000 serpents awakening. Her braids twisted, tightened, split, and from each strand's end, cold scales and beady eyes emerged. Her skin turned pale as river clay, her nails black as obsidian. No, she cried, clutching her head as the snakes writhed, biting at the air. Her vision blurred, and when it cleared, she saw the first villager in her path turn to stone. The dream cracked apart like ice underfoot. Naima woke, gasping, in the dark of her swamp lair. Her snakes hissed softly, as if remembering too. She sat up, hugging her knees, staring at the slow drip of water from a root above. Somewhere out there, beyond the mangrove, she felt it again, that ripple, that pull. Someone was coming for her. And she wondered, for the first time in years, if they would come to kill her, or to set her free. The night lay heavy over Kambusa. The moon hung pale and thin, a sickle of silver cutting through the dark sky. In the heart of the kingdom, Tay knelt before the diviner's hut, the air thick with the smell of burning palm fronds. Inside, the old diviner, Baba Ifalo, was bent over a low table carved with river symbols, his hands tracing lines in fine white chalk. His beard was the color of river foam, his eyes milk-white with age, but his hearing and wisdom were sharp as the tip of a hunter's spear. You came, Baba Ifalo rasped without looking up. The elders told me you agreed to face the Serpent Queen. Tay bowed low. I will not see my people swallowed by the river's anger. If this is what Luma demands, I will stand before her cursed one. The old man's hands paused over the chalk. He lifted his head slowly. You speak with the voice of a man who does not yet know the weight of his path. Tay straightened. I have faced leopards in the dark and crocodiles in flood waters. I will face her. Baba Ifalo gave a short, dry laugh. Leopards kill with claws. Crocodiles with teeth. But she kills with her eyes. You will not have the chance to raise your spear if you meet her gaze. From beneath the table, the old man drew 3 objects, placing them carefully between them. The first was a shield no wider than Tay's chest, polished so bright it reflected the flickering firelight. Mirror shield, Baba Ifalo said. Let her see herself in this instead of you. The second was a small leather pouch that smelled faintly of crushed mint and ash. Charm of invisibility. When you crush it in your palm and speak the words, you will vanish from her sight, but only for a short while. Use it well. The last was a blade the color of midnight, its edge glinting faintly red when it caught the light. Volcanic glass, the old man murmured. Forged in the mountain's fire and cooled in the river's heart. Only this can pierce her cursed skin. Tay touched the blade's hilt. It was cold, almost alive. Baba Ifalo's tone dropped lower. But hear me, hunter, every gift from the spirits carries a cost. The mirror may crack, the charm may fade, and the blade may not strike true if your heart falters. Tay met the old man's gaze, unflinching. I will not falter. The diviner studied him for a long moment, then leaned closer, his voice like dry leaves whispering. Do not kill her in hatred, Tay. For if you do, her curse will pass on, and you will not return to this village as a man. The warning hung in the air like smoke. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of the river. The water was restless tonight. Tay took the gifts, bowing deeply. When the moon rises again, I will enter the mangrove, he said. Baba Ifalo's eyes clouded with something that might have been pity or respect. Then go, hunter. The spirits are watching. As Tay stepped into the cool night, the fireflies along the riverbank began to glow, brighter, almost guiding him toward the darkness beyond the village. The mangrove swamps lay in a restless hush. The air was thick with the smell of brine and rotting leaves, and the water was black as obsidian, broken only by the gleam of the moon filtering through tangled branches. Here, the wind rarely reached, and the stillness could press against the skin like damp cloth. In the heart of that swamp sat Naima. She rested upon a mound of twisted roots, the tide lapping gently at her scaled ankles. Around her, the snakes that crowned her head shifted and hissed, their tongues flicking at the night air. Their bodies pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. For days, the swamp had been quiet, save for the occasional cry of a night heron or the splash of fish fleeing from shadowy shapes below. But tonight, Naima's eyes narrowed. There was a vibration in the water, a ripple that did not belong. She closed her eyes and listened. The snakes quieted, their movements stilled. Through the web of roots and the slow current, she felt it, a disturbance. Someone was moving through the river channels toward her. Her long fingers curled. "Another fool," she murmured. Her voice was low, soft, yet carried the cold edge of memory. Many had come before. Hunters, warriors, even priests. None had returned to Kambusa. But this felt different. There was a steadiness to the approaching rhythm, a careful, deliberate pacing. Whoever came was not rushing like a desperate villager. He was coming with purpose. The swamp seemed to sense it too. The mangroves leaned lower, their roots tightening like clasped fingers. The water thickened with silt as unseen shapes stirred beneath the surface. "Let him come," Naima whispered to the dark. She rose, her long skirt of river reeds swaying, her scales catching the faint moonlight. Each step sent ripples shivering out across the water. Far in the distance, beyond the veil of the swamp, a faint glimmer flickered, like the glow of fireflies moving in a line. Naima tilted her head. She remembered such lights from long ago, when the river had been her temple, before the curse, before the exile. Her snakes began to writhe restlessly. One hissed toward the faint light. "Yes," Naima said softly, almost to herself. "Let us see what courage has stepped into my waters tonight." Somewhere deep within the mangrove, a crocodile bellowed, a deep, rumbling sound that carried over the still water. Naima stepped into her canoe of carved ebony wood. It slid forward without paddle or push, drawn by unseen currents she commanded. As she drifted deeper into the shadows, her eyes caught the reflection of the moon on the black water, but in that reflection, just for a heartbeat, she thought she saw something else. A shimmer. A glint like polished stone. Her gaze hardened. Whoever came would find more than a cursed woman in the swamp. They would find the river's wrath made flesh. The mangrove closed behind her as if sealing the path. The moon hung pale and high, casting silver ripples across the surface of the Oba River. Tay stood at the narrow mouth of the mangrove, where the river split into winding channels that disappeared beneath a roof of tangled roots and thick leaves. The night air was humid and heavy with the smell of wet earth. The fireflies were waiting. They bobbed in slow, patient arcs, glowing like tiny lanterns. Tay tightened the strap of his leather satchel, feeling the reassuring weight of the mirror shield pressed against his back. At his side, the volcanic glass blade sat in its carved wooden sheath, black as midnight but sharp enough to drink light. "You will not walk into her lair as a hunter," the old priest had told him before he left the village. "You will walk in as a shadow. Or you will not walk out at all." Tay dipped his paddle into the water and pushed forward, his narrow canoe gliding into the throat of the swamp. The fireflies drifted ahead, weaving between roots like they knew the path. Almost immediately, the air changed. The sounds of the river faded, replaced by an unnatural stillness. Leaves seemed to rustle without wind. The black water reflected only the fireflies, not the moon. He paddled slowly, scanning every shadow. It was then that the first voice came. "Tay." It was soft. Almost like a woman's call from far away. He stopped, his paddle hovering above the water. "Tay," the voice came again, this time closer. He gritted his teeth and kept paddling. The priest had warned him about this too. "She will call you in voices you know. Do not answer." But then he froze. the next voice was not a stranger's. It was his mother's. "My son," the voice whispered, warm and aching. "Why do you come here? She will take you from me." Tay's grip tightened around the paddle. His mother had been dead for 3 seasons now. From the corner of his eye, movement flickered between the mangrove roots, the outline of a woman, standing half submerged in the water, her arms outstretched. He fixed his eyes on the fireflies and kept moving. The figure slid soundlessly back into the blackness. The air thickened as the canoe wound deeper. Insects buzzed in strange patterns. Twice, he saw something glint in the water beside him, scales that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Then the fireflies stopped. They hovered over a pool of still, ink-black water surrounded by massive roots. The path ahead was hidden in shadow, but somewhere beyond it, Tay could hear the faint creak of wood, the sound of another canoe moving without paddle. He reached for the mirror shield and angled it toward the darkness. In its polished surface, he caught a glimpse of movement, long hair swaying like reeds, and a pale face watching him from between the roots. Naima was near. The fireflies swirled suddenly and darted forward, their light vanishing into the shadows. Tay took a deep breath and followed, his canoe sliding into the deepest heart of the mangrove. The fireflies slowed, forming a drifting arc above Tay's canoe. Their golden light barely reached the water, and everything beyond the first few roots was swallowed by blackness. It felt as though the swamp had stopped breathing. Tay could hear only the slow drip, drip, drip of water falling from the mangrove leaves. And then, a soft ripple in the water. He gripped the paddle tighter, eyes scanning left and right. Something brushed against the side of the canoe, not a log, not a fish. It was deliberate. A slow, gliding presence. Tay. The voice floated through the air again, softer now, but rich and resonant, as if it came from inside his chest. It was not his mother this time. It was a stranger, low, melodic, and yet carrying an ache that pulled at him. "You carry Luma's light," the voice said. "But do you know her cruelty?" Tay stayed silent, remembering the warning, "If you speak, she will weave her voice into your soul." There was a sudden disturbance in the water ahead. He caught the gleam of pale skin and dark, coiling shapes moving just beneath the surface. The fireflies shifted nervously in the air, their glow flickering. Naima emerged halfway from the water. Her face was as beautiful as the elders had whispered, high cheekbones, full lips, skin shimmering like wet bronze. But her hair writhed. A dozen sleek black serpents twined and shifted, their small eyes glinting red. Her gaze locked onto his, and the world seemed to narrow until there was only her. "You fear me," she said softly. "Yet you do not turn away. Why?" Tay's fingers itched to reach for the mirror shield, but he held still. Naima tilted her head, the snakes swaying in unison. "Do you think me a monster? Or do you see the woman they cursed?" The water around her began to swirl slowly, though her body remained still. A faint hiss rose from the snakes, a sound that slid into his ears like a warning and a promise at once. Then she smiled, a slow, sorrowful smile. "You came with charms and steel," she whispered. "But no weapon cuts deeper than truth. Do you wish to hear mine?" Before he could even move, the fireflies darted upward, scattering their light across the dark water. For an instant, the mangrove was illuminated, and Tay saw shadows moving all around him. Long, sinuous shapes beneath the surface, circling his canoe. When the light faded, Naima was gone. Only her voice remained, drifting from somewhere deeper in the swamp. "Follow, hunter. Or lose the chance to know why the river floods." The fireflies began to move again, their path leading straight into the darkness she had vanished into. Tay hesitated only a moment before pushing the canoe forward. The fireflies led Tay along a twisting waterway so narrow he had to pull his paddle in and push off the mangrove roots with his hands. The air grew thicker here, heavy with the scent of wet earth and the faint musk of something reptilian. Ahead, the fireflies slowed and hovered in a glowing ring above a pool of still water. There was no movement, no sound, until the surface broke and Naima rose again. This time she stood, half in water, half on a root, the snakes in her hair curling lazily. In the dim light, their scales glistened like drops of obsidian. "You came to kill me," she said, her voice neither accusing nor afraid. "But the elders did not tell you why I became what I am." Tay kept his paddle across his lap, his eyes flicking from her face to the snakes. "The elders told me enough," he said carefully. Naima's lips curved. "Enough to fear me, yes. Enough to think me a curse. But not enough to understand the river's anger." She stepped onto another root, her movements as fluid as the water itself. The snakes shifted, some resting against her shoulders, others watching Tay with unblinking eyes. "Long ago, I was Nia," she began. "I served Luma faithfully. I sang her praises. I bathed in her waters each dawn. And she rewarded me with beauty, with grace, with the love of the people. But beauty is a dangerous blessing." Her voice softened, turning inward as if she spoke to herself. "Baju came to me on a night like this, the wind dry, the river restless. Some say he came gently. Others say he took what was never his. Both are true. I did not wish for his touch, yet I could not deny the pull of the river in my blood." Tay's grip on the paddle tightened. The way she said it, neither fully victim nor fully willing, made the air between them heavy. "When Luma found out," Naima continued, "she did not curse him. No. She turned her wrath on me. She twisted my hair into snakes, cursed my eyes to stone, and drove me here, into the mangrove's shadow." The snakes hissed softly, almost mournfully, as if echoing her words. "I begged her to release me," Naima said, her gaze holding his. "But she said the people must fear me, or they would forget her power. So I became their warning." She stepped closer to the canoe now, the water lapping softly against the wood. "Do you still think you know enough, Hunter?" Tay felt his heartbeat in his ears. "You tell a sorrowful tale," he said slowly. "But sorrow alone doesn't flood rivers." Naima smiled faintly. "No. But rage does. And the river's rage is not only mine." The fireflies dipped lower, their light brightening just enough for Tay to see movement behind her, two massive coils in the water, scales the color of night. Something was watching him from below. "Come deeper," Naima said softly. "If you would hear the rest." The fireflies began to drift further in, into water so dark it looked like ink. Tay hesitated, his charms heavy in his pouch, his blade cold against his hip. But his arms moved anyway, pushing the canoe toward her shadow. The fireflies drifted deeper into the mangroves, their glow barely holding back the darkness. Tay's canoe slid forward, the water parting in ripples that seemed to whisper against the hull. Roots arched overhead, knotted like the fingers of old spirits clutching secrets. Naima moved ahead without sound, her bare feet leaving no disturbance in the water. The snakes in her hair swayed as though breathing with her, their tongues tasting the humid air. Tay felt their unblinking eyes on him, measuring, testing. "Few have ever crossed this place," she murmured. "Fewer still have left." The canoe scraped softly against a submerged log, and Tay's hand instinctively went to the pouch at his waist where the invisibility charm lay wrapped in palm fiber. He could feel the faint warmth of its power, but he didn't draw it yet. The air was thick with something heavier than fear, something that made his chest tighten. They came to a curtain of hanging roots and vines so dense it seemed impossible to pass. Naima did not push them aside, instead, the vines shivered on their own, parting as though bowing to her. A scent of damp stone and cold water wafted out. Beyond was a hidden lagoon. Moonlight poured through a ragged opening above, turning the water into a shimmering silver mirror. Small islands of moss rose here and there, and on one of them stood a half-collapsed shrine, its carvings worn by time, yet still showing the face of Luma, serene and merciless. "This was once my temple," Naima said, her voice low. "Here I spoke to the goddess. Here I brought offerings from the people. Now it is my prison." She stepped from the water onto the mossy shrine island. As she moved, the silver surface of the lagoon stirred, and the coils Tay had glimpsed earlier slid into view. They belonged to a serpent so vast its body circled the lagoon like a living wall. Its head rose slightly, eyes gleaming gold in the moonlight. "My son," Naima said, placing a hand on the serpent's jaw. Ajani. The serpent lowered its head in acknowledgement of her touch but never took its gaze from Tay. Why bring me here? Tay asked, his voice steady but his fingers itching to touch his blade. Because you must understand, she said, stepping closer to him. You cannot kill what you pity. You cannot destroy what you desire to save. And if you wish to save your kingdom, you must know who truly threatens it. Her words coiled around him as surely as the serpent's body encircled the lagoon. What do you mean? He asked. Naima's smile was slow, deliberate. The floods are not my doing alone. The river obeys Luma still, and she is angrier than you can imagine. If I die, her wrath will not end. It will grow. Tay's mind raced. If she spoke the truth, killing her might doom Kambusa rather than save it. But truth from the mouth of the cursed was a dangerous thing. The serpent slid closer, the water rippling softly. The snakes in Naima's hair began to hiss, a sound that somehow carried both warning and welcome. You have a choice, hunter, she said. Fight me, and risk the goddess's vengeance. Or, join me, and we may yet turn her anger aside. The moonlight painted her in silver and shadow, her eyes holding his as the lagoon waited in silence. Tay stood still on the damp moss of the shrine island, the chill of the water seeping into his feet. The serpent Ajani's coils made no sound, yet the weight of its presence pressed against him like an unspoken threat. Above, moonlight flickered through shifting clouds, painting Naima's face in pale silver. You speak as though Luma is the true danger, Tay said, his voice measured. Yet she is the goddess of beauty and sweet waters. The people worship her for her blessings. They say she keeps the river pure. Naima laughed, low and bitter. Blessings. You think she gives freely? No, hunter. Every blessing is paid for with something taken. She stepped closer, the snakes in her hair swaying as if in agreement. I was her most faithful servant, her chosen voice to the people. But when Baju came to me, she saw not his crime, but my presence in it as a stain on her temple. Tay frowned. You were cursed because of what happened with Baju. Yes, Naima said sharply. But not because she pitied me. Not because she wished to protect the temple's purity. She cursed me because she could not bear that a mortal woman was loved by one she could not control. Tay's eyes narrowed. You're saying she was jealous? Naima's smile was cold. Jealous, and afraid. For all her power, Luma fears the old ways. She fears the unions between spirits and mortals that can birth guardians stronger than her will. Her hand rested briefly on Ajani's head. When she cursed me, she tried to destroy me. But from my blood and my grief, Ajani was born. He is proof of what she fears, a spirit whose loyalty is not to her, but to me. The serpent's tongue flickered in the moonlight, tasting the air around Tay. Why tell me this? Tay asked. Because the floods will not end with my death. They will worsen. She sends them now as a warning. If I fall, she will drown your villages until the Oba River runs over the rooftops. And she will say it is punishment for striking down her faithful priestess. Tay looked past her to the crumbling shrine, its carvings eroded but still bearing Luma's face, serene, beautiful, and utterly unyielding. He thought of the elders, of the hungry families along the banks, of the children's cries when the water swept away their homes. You want me to spare you, he said. Naima shook her head slowly. I want you to choose wisely. You carry the mirror shield, the invisibility charm, and the volcanic glass blade. All weapons meant to end me. But if you use them on Luma instead, her eyes caught the moonlight, and for a heartbeat, Tay felt they were endless pools into which he might fall. You could end the true source of the kingdom's suffering. A sharp gust rustled the mangroves, scattering the moonlight across the lagoon. Somewhere in the distance, a heron cried, a sound lonely and sharp in the still night. Tay's hand rested on the hilt of his blade, but his mind was tangled. If Naima spoke truth, striking her down could bring doom. If she lied, sparing her could cost countless lives. Ajani's golden eyes never blinked. The goddess's name seemed to whisper from the shifting water, Luma. Luma. Naima's voice dropped to a whisper. You came here to end my curse. Perhaps you will, but not in the way you think. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it the scent of rain, thick, heavy, and tinged with the sharpness of iron. Tay's grip tightened on the volcanic glass blade as his ears caught the faint rush of water, though the river here was still. Naima's eyes lifted toward the source, her snakes hissing in restless unison. The sound grew louder, a low roar building from the heart of the Oba River. Then, without warning, the shrine island trembled beneath Tay's feet. He staggered, steadying himself against a moss-slick pillar. The black water around them churned, and from its depths rose a vision, not flesh, not spirit, but something in between. A woman's form, made entirely of swirling water, emerged waist-high from the lagoon. Her features shifted constantly, sometimes youthful, sometimes ancient. Her voice rolled like a distant storm. Tay, hunter of Kambusa, the water woman's gaze locked on him. You carry the blessings of the elders, but your task is greater than they know. Naima's expression darkened. Luma, she said flatly. The water woman smiled faintly, as though savoring the sound of her own name. Faithless one, you still dare to speak to me. Why do you hide behind storms and curses? Naima's voice was steady, but the snakes writhed faster. Tell him why you truly want me gone. Luma's eyes flashed like sunlight on ripples. You have polluted my temple, defiled my waters with your mortal weakness. You are a blemish upon my realm. She turned back to Tay, her tone softening. Strike her down, and I will bless your kingdom with 50 seasons of calm waters and overflowing harvests. Naima stepped forward. 50 seasons, and then what? Another flood. Another curse. Tell him about the river spirits you drowned in the old wars. Tell him about the children's souls bound to your current to serve you forever. The water around Luma shimmered. Lies, she said simply. But her voice lacked the perfect smoothness it had before. Tay's heart pounded. His hand hovered over the mirror shield strapped to his side. The goddess's form was beautiful, hypnotic, yet something in her gaze felt colder than the deepest well. Hunter, Luma said again, her voice turning sweet, kill her now, and you will be the hero of your people. Spare her, and their bones will wash up on the banks before the next moon. The water surged suddenly, splashing up to Tay's knees. In that moment, a shape brushed against his ankle, soft, warm, alive. He glanced down and saw a single golden fish circling him, its scales glinting brighter than fire. It darted away, cutting a perfect spiral in the dark water before disappearing. Naima's eyes widened. That was Sephu, she whispered. The water maiden born from my blood. She wouldn't come unless she wanted you to know the truth. Luma's expression flickered, just for a heartbeat, into something like unease. The fish's spiral still shimmered faintly on the water's surface, an unbroken sign that seemed to hum with unseen meaning. Tay looked from Naima to Luma, the weight of the river pressing on his chest. One path promised peace at a price he could not yet measure. The other risked war with the goddess herself. The moon slid behind a cloud, leaving them in deep shadow. The moon was gone now, swallowed by thick clouds, and the only light came from the faint green glow of Naima's eyes and the tiny fireflies clinging to the damp air. The river's voice grew strange, no longer the steady lap of waves against the shrine's stone steps, but a low, rumbling growl. Tay's fingers tightened around the mirror shield, its surface catching slivers of Naima's serpentine hair. His heart felt split in two, one half pulling him toward Luma's offer, the other to the unspoken plea in Naima's voice. But before he could speak, the water at the shrine's edge shuddered as if something massive had slid just beneath its surface. Naima froze. The snakes on her head lifted high, tasting the air. Something is here, she murmured. Luma's form wavered, her water body rippling uneasily. Leave, mortal, she ordered sharply. Now. This is not your fight. Her words were almost drowned by the sudden whip crack of water exploding upward. A shape burst from the river, black as night, scales glistening with oil-slick colors. It was a serpent, but far larger than any mortal creature. Its head was crowned with jagged fins, and its eyes burned like molten gold. Ajani, Naima breathed, her voice trembling between awe and grief. The serpent hissed, a sound so deep it shook the shrine's pillars. It lunged straight for Tay. He barely raised the shield in time. The creature's fangs struck the polished surface, and the reflection caught its own gaze. For a heartbeat, it recoiled, writhing violently, then dove beneath the water again. Luma's voice thundered. "You dare strike at my messenger?" "That's no messenger," Naima snapped, stepping forward. "That's my son, born of my blood the night you cursed me. He serves me, not you." The river churned. Another shape rose beside Ajani, a woman of liquid gold, her hair flowing like sunlight on water. She was breathtaking, but her eyes were fierce. "Sephu," Naima whispered, her voice breaking. The golden maiden turned her gaze on Tay. "Hunter, the river is not as it seems. If you side with Luma, you choose the one who brought death to the spirits and chains to the waterborn. If you side with my mother, you face a goddess's wrath." Ajani circled the shrine now, his massive body cutting spirals through the dark water. Tay could feel the heat of his breath even from the steps. The air grew heavier, pressing down like a hand on his chest. The fireflies began to scatter. Tay knew in his gut that hesitation now could mean death, yet the choice before him was tangled beyond reason. Naima's snakes hissed in warning. "Tay, you can't fight them both. Decide." From the river, Ajani reared his head again, golden eyes fixed on the hunter. From the water's heart, Luma's towering form loomed, her gaze cold and commanding. And from the ripples at his feet, Sephu's voice whispered in his mind alone. "Choose the truth, not the promise." The first drop of rain struck Tay's cheek, hot as blood. The storm was coming. The first drop of rain became 1,000, warm and heavy, striking the shrine roof and the river with a hiss like boiling oil. The air was thick with the scent of wet stone and something sharper, the metallic tang of coming blood. Lightning tore across the sky, revealing the whole scene in a white flash. Ajani, coiled and monstrous, circling the shrine like a living wall. Sephu, her golden body glowing brighter in the downpour. Luma, towering over them all, her face unreadable as the storm she had called. And Naima, standing between Tay and the river, her snakes rearing high, eyes locked on the goddess. Then the thunder came, a deep, bone-rattling crack that made the shrine floor tremble. The river surged up the steps, splashing over Tay's sandals. "Tay," Naima shouted over the wind, "if you strike now, you will never leave this place alive. But if you listen, truly listen, you may yet see the truth." "Truth." Luma's voice rolled like the tide. "There is only my will. Mortal, you came here to end the Serpent Queen. Do it now, before she poisons your mind." Ajani let out a roar so deep it was felt more than heard. With a violent surge, he lunged at Tay again, not to strike, but to coil his massive body around the shrine. His scales were slick beneath the rain, glistening black with flashes of green, sealing off every escape route. Sephu moved in the water behind him, her voice sharp and cutting. "Brother, hold your rage. The hunter does not yet see." Lightning again. This time, Tay caught it, not just the light, but a reflection in the water's surface. For the briefest heartbeat, he saw something impossible, the shrine not as it was now, but as it had been before, bright, whole, surrounded by gardens, with Naima laughing beside the river, her hair still woven in shells. The image broke with the crash of a wave slamming against the pillars. "What is this?" Tay demanded, his voice hoarse. "Why do I see her, before the curse?" Naima stepped closer, her snakes hissing softly in the rain. "Because the river remembers. It wants you to know." Luma's expression sharpened. "Enough. This storm will wash you all away if you defy me." The wind screamed now, tearing at Tay's cloak. Ajani's coils tightened, the shrine groaning under the strain. Sephu's glow pulsed brighter, sending ripples of gold through the black water. And then, in the heart of the chaos, a voice rose, not from any of them, but from the river itself. It was deep, old, and heavy with sorrow. "The truth sleeps in the depths. To wake it, blood must be given, freely." All eyes turned to Tay. Even the storm seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Ajani's gaze narrowed. "Hunter, will you pay that price?" The rain came harder. The choice could no longer wait. The rain slowed, as if the sky itself leaned in to hear Tay's answer. He could feel every gaze on him, Naima's pleading, Luma's commanding, Ajani's unblinking, Sefu's watchful. Even the river's dark, swirling current seemed to pause, waiting. Tay's fingers tightened around the hilt of his volcanic glass blade. It was warm in his grip, almost alive, its edge catching stray glints from Sefu's golden glow. "You ask for blood," Tay said slowly, his voice cutting through the rolling thunder, "but whose?" Naima stepped forward, the rain matting her serpents against her face. "Yours. Only yours. No life taken, only life given." "That is not your right to demand," Luma snapped, her voice like a whip. "He is mine to command." "Command him, then," Naima retorted, her tone sharpened by centuries of rage. "But you cannot command the river's will." Ajani's massive head lowered until his eyes were level with Tay's. In those green-gold depths, Tay saw not just the predator, but the protector. "Hunter, blood binds. If you give it freely, the river will show you what no god wishes you to know." The words crawled under Tay's skin. He thought of the elders who sent him, of the mirror shield at his side, of the storms that had already destroyed homes. And he thought of Naima's voice when she said truth. With a breath that felt heavier than his own body, Tay knelt at the water's edge. The rain had slowed to a whisper now, the storm holding its breath. He drew the blade across his palm in one swift motion. The sting was sharp, bright. Dark red welled up and dripped into the black water. The river reacted instantly. It shuddered, not like a wave, but like a living thing, and the surface boiled with sudden heat. Lightning struck the water, not the sky, and for a moment the world was gold. Then it came. Images burst into Tay's mind, flooding him so fast his knees buckled. He saw Naima before the curse, laughing, offering flowers at the shrine. He saw Baju, not as a monster, but as a man carved of river mist, his eyes full of longing. He saw the night of the Harmattan, the meeting under moonlight, the moment it shifted from gentle to desperate. He saw Luma arrive, not as a savior, but as a storm in human shape. Her gaze was not pity, it was possession. And when she struck, it was Naima who bore the punishment, not Baju. The vision twisted again, showing Luma's temple growing more powerful as fear of Naima spread. The curse had not just punished, it had built a throne. When the visions faded, Tay found himself gasping, his cut hand still bleeding into the current. Naima was watching him, silent. Sefu's glow dimmed, as if she, too, had seen. Ajani's coils shifted, restless. Luma's voice broke the silence, cold as obsidian. "Mortal, you have seen more than you should. Leave now, and I will spare your life." But Tay stood. His voice was low, steady. "You cursed her to keep your power." The goddess's eyes narrowed, and the storm above them began to stir again. The sky broke open without warning. The stillness shattered into roaring wind, sheets of rain slamming down like spears. Lightning webbed the clouds above, each bolt carrying the heat of Luma's fury. "You dare." Luma's voice was no longer the honeyed tone of the river goddess, it was the deep, splitting rumble of floodwaters breaking through stone. Her gown of streaming light thrashed around her like angry tides. "You dare speak against me, mortal." Tay didn't flinch. The truth still burned in his chest from the visions. His fingers curled tightly around the volcanic glass blade, its edge slick with rain. "You wanted the people afraid," Tay said, forcing his voice through the wind. "You wanted them to pray to you for safety, and you made Naima your warning." Naima's snakes hissed low, their bodies weaving restlessly. She stayed silent, her gaze darting between Tay and the goddess. "You think you understand the work of gods?" Luma's eyes blazed, a blinding white light spilling from them. "The fear I sowed kept your kingdom safe from greater ruin." Luma thrust her hand toward Naima, was weak. "She broke the purity of my shrine. The punishment was justice." "It was vengeance," Tay shot back. His voice cut like flint. "And vengeance doesn't build peace. It only builds chains." The river churned violently. Sefu gasped, her golden form flickering like a dying flame. Ajani coiled tighter around the shrine's edge, his massive body bracing against the surge. "You will not leave this place alive," Luma thundered, raising her arms. Water leapt from the river like living spears, curling midair and aiming for Tay's heart. The hunter moved before thought could catch him. He spun the mirror shield forward, the polished bronze flashing in the lightning's glare. The first spear of water struck it, shattering into harmless spray. The second curled backward, striking the river's surface and exploding into mist. Luma staggered, blinking against her own reflected fury. "You dare!" Ajani's voice thundered over hers. "Enough." The serpent spirit rose high, higher than the shrine itself, his eyes glowing with ancient power. "This fight is not yours to decide alone, Luma." The goddess's eyes narrowed. "And you would betray the river that bore you." Ajani's coils shifted uneasily, but his gaze didn't leave hers. The river bore her too. Naima stepped forward, the rain parting subtly around her as if the air itself feared her. Her voice was steady, but the snakes in her hair writhed with anticipation. "Let the mortal speak in the court of the river. If the truth shames me, I will not resist my death." For the first time, Luma hesitated. The wind howled between them, but something colder passed through the goddess's eyes: calculation. Then, in a voice low and dangerous, she said, "So be it. At dawn, we meet at the deep current. The river itself will decide who lives." With a swirl of her gown, she dissolved into spray, vanishing into the black water. The storm eased at once, though the air still hummed with her power. Tay's knees felt heavy, but he stayed standing. Naima's eyes met his, not grateful, not angry, but unreadable. "You've stepped into waters deeper than you know, hunter," she said softly. "And the current doesn't always let go." The rain had thinned to a silver drizzle by the time they left the shrine, but the air still clung to them like wet cloth. Tay walked with careful steps along the slick riverbank, each foot sinking slightly into the mud. His heart had not slowed since the goddess vanished, and in the quiet after the storm, the weight of what he had agreed to began to press on him. Sephu drifted beside him, her luminous golden skin dimmed with worry. "The deep current is no place for mortals," she said, voice trembling. "It is where the river's soul sleeps. Only gods, spirits, and the dead are welcome there." Ajani, slithering ahead, flicked his massive tongue into the air. Then he must learn to move like all three if he wants to survive. Tay glanced between them. "What is this trial Luma spoke of?" Ajani stopped, his great head turning to meet Tay's gaze. "The deep current will strip you bare. Not your skin, not your flesh, but your truth. It will show what lies at the center of your spirit. If the river finds your truth unworthy, he let the sentence die, but the hiss in his throat finished it well enough." Naima followed silently behind them, her snakes weaving slowly as though tasting the tension in the air. She hadn't spoken since the shrine. Now, her voice came low, almost reluctant. "The deep current is older than Luma. Older than the kingdom. It will not be swayed by beauty or words. Only what is true." They reached a sheltered cove where the river bent sharply, its waters dark as obsidian. Ajani lowered his body into the shallows, his coils rippling across the surface like living hills. "Rest," he said to Tay. "You will need strength, and not just in your arms." Tay sat on a smooth stone, setting down the mirror shield and volcanic blade. His fingers ached from gripping them for so long. He looked toward Naima, who stood apart, her gaze fixed on the water. "If this trial frees you," he asked, "what will you do?" Her snakes hissed softly, almost like a sigh. "Freedom is a word mortals love," she said. "But I have learned that curses grow roots. Even if you cut them, they leave shadows." She looked at him then, eyes glimmering in the fading light. "Perhaps I will guard the river. Perhaps I will vanish into the mangroves. Perhaps," she stopped herself and turned away. Night deepened around them. Fireflies floated in lazy arcs over the water, their glow mirrored in the dark surface. Sephu hummed an old river lullaby, the kind sung to children before floods came, while Ajani coiled protectively near the cove's mouth. Tay lay back on the stone, but sleep was slow to find him. His mind wandered, To his mother's blessing before he left the village, to the elders' warning about gods, to Naima's unreadable eyes. Somewhere in the hours before dawn, a voice slid into his dreams, not Luma's thunder or Ajani's rumble, but something quieter, like water trickling through reeds. When you stand before the deep current, remember, the river gives nothing without taking something in return. He woke before the first light, the words still echoing in his mind. Ajani was already moving, Sefu's glow brightening in the gloom. Naima was gone from where she had stood, until Tay saw her in the water, waist deep, her snakes floating like dark ribbons around her head. The deep current waits, Ajani said. Once we enter, there is no turning back. Tay tightened his grip on his blade and shield. His breath came slow and deliberate. Then let's meet it. They stepped into the river together, the water pulling at their legs as though urging them forward into its black heart. The water was cool at first, swirling lazily around their knees, then thighs, but as they moved deeper, the temperature dropped sharply. It was like walking into the breath of an ancient cave, cold, patient, and watchful. Tay felt the current tug against him, not violently, but insistently, as if it knew exactly where it wanted to take him. Ajani's massive coils glided effortlessly through the dark, his scales catching flecks of pale dawn light. Sefu floated alongside Tay, her glow dimming to a faint shimmer, so as not to draw unwanted attention. Naima was half submerged ahead, the snakes on her head weaving restlessly, their tongues tasting the unseen. "Keep your eyes ahead," Ajani warned, his voice carrying over the sound of the moving water. "The deep current is not just a place, it is a will. It will try to make you look back." Tay swallowed and nodded, his grip firm on the volcanic blade. The mirror shield was strapped across his back, its polished surface wrapped in cloth so the water's touch wouldn't awaken it too soon. As they pressed forward, the riverbed dropped away without warning. One moment Tay's feet were dragging against smooth stones, and the next, there was nothing but a vast, swallowing depth. He flailed for a second, but Sefu's hand caught his arm, steadying him. "Breathe like the river," she whispered. "Slow. Wide. Let it hold you." He tried, and felt the water no longer pushing him upward or downward, but carrying him like a leaf in its grasp. Light from above faded quickly, replaced by a greenish gloom. That was when the shapes began to appear. First, they were just shifting shadows, far off, the silhouettes of fish or drifting weeds. Then they took form, faces he knew. His mother's, smiling as she cooked him pottage over the fire. His father's, stern but proud, placing the hunter's bow in his hands for the first time. His sister's, laughing as she ran through the rain. They floated around him, their voices soft and coaxing. "Tay, come home, leave this place." The pull to turn back was sharp, almost physical, but Ajani's earlier warning rang in his mind. He forced his eyes forward, though his chest ached with longing. Naima swam ahead, silent, her body cutting through the water like a shadow. Tay noticed that the river was speaking to her too, shapes forming around her, but unlike his, they were monstrous. Figures with broken limbs, twisted mouths, eyes blind with grief. They reached for her, but she did not slow. Then, from the darkness below, something vast moved. It was not the steady drift of a fish or serpent, it was deliberate, circling. Tay caught a glint of pale, lidless eyes and a mouth that opened far too wide, lined with teeth like river stones. Sefu's hand gripped his tighter. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "If you thrash, it will follow. If you keep moving, it will watch, and let you pass." The thing kept pace with them for what felt like hours, its massive body weaving in and out of the gloom. Tay's lungs burned, his legs felt heavy, but the current carried them on until the creature finally sank into the depths, gone as silently as it had come. Ahead, Ajani slowed. The water around them began to glow faintly, not from Sefu, but from something beneath, a swirling light that pulsed like the heartbeat of the river itself. "We have reached the threshold," Ajani said, his voice low. "Beyond this point, the current will test each of us alone." Naima turned slightly, her eyes unreadable. "Then this is where truths are bared." Tay nodded once, the weight of his mission pressing harder than ever. The light ahead swelled, and the water began to hum, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate inside his bones. The deep current was awake. The hum grew louder until it was no longer just in Tay's ears, it was in his skull, his teeth, his very blood. The water brightened to a milky green glow, swirling in slow circles around them. Tay felt a sudden, sharp tug, and in the blink of an eye, Ajani, Sefu, and Naima were gone. He was alone. The current no longer pulled him forward. It held him suspended, as if weighing him in its palm. All around him, the glow deepened, and shapes began to form within it. The first was his village. He saw the red clay huts, the smoke curling from cooking fires, the elders gathered beneath the ancient Irako tree. He saw his mother stirring a pot, her shoulders bent, her face tired. Beside her was his father, but something was wrong. His father's eyes were not warm as Tay remembered, they were cold, accusing. "You left us," his father's voice boomed through the water. "You chose the river over your blood." Tay flinched. "I came here to save you," he said, the words bubbling into the current. The scene shifted, and now he saw the flood, the Oba River swollen, its waters devouring homes. He saw children crying, elders swept away. But this time, the faces turned toward him, and every mouth spoke in unison. "You brought this." The weight of the accusation pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "This isn't true." The current pulsed, as if testing him. The village faded, and another image took its place, the mangrove swamps, lit by ghostly moonlight. Naima stood there before him, her snakes hissing softly. But her eyes were not full of rage, they were heavy with grief. "You think I am only a monster," she said, her voice low and steady. "But you have not asked why." Tay opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the image of Naima changed. Now she was kneeling on the riverbank, her hair still woven with shells, her hands clasped in prayer. Then came the shadow, Baju's shape emerging from the water, eyes glinting like polished stones. The scene shifted quickly, too quickly for Tay to fully take it in, but he caught fragments: Naima's scream, the goddess Luma's wrath, the twisting of her form, the exile. The current's voice finally spoke, deep and ancient. "The river holds truth for those who can bear it. Do you fight her? Or do you see her?" Tay's grip tightened on the volcanic blade at his side. His first instinct was to say he fought for the kingdom. But in the silence that followed, he realized the current was not asking about battle. It was asking about understanding. "I will see her," he said at last, his voice firm. The glow around him brightened, the current swirled faster, and in its movement, Tay felt a subtle shift, as if the river itself had nodded in approval. Then, just as suddenly as they had been taken from him, Sefu, Ajani, and Naima reappeared. Each of them looked different, shaken, quiet, as if they too had faced something deep inside themselves. Ajani spoke first. "The current has accepted us. We may pass." But Naima's gaze lingered on Tay for a moment longer, her snake strangely still. "You saw something," she said softly. It wasn't a question. Tay met her eyes. "So did you." The current released them, and the glowing water gave way to shadow once more. Ahead, a faint red light shimmered, the sign of the river maw, where their true trial waited. The red glow ahead grew larger with each step, until the water around them seemed tinted with fire. The current here was sluggish, as if even the river itself hesitated to approach what lay ahead. The walls narrowed into a jagged corridor of black stone, slick with moss, and the ceiling hung low, heavy with roots that reached down like gnarled fingers. Tay's instinct screamed at him to move carefully. His grip tightened on the volcanic glass blade, its dark surface catching the red shimmer. Sefu swam close to his side, her golden scales reflecting the strange light, while Ajani moved ahead, his massive coils twisting silently through the water. Naima followed last, her snakes restless, tasting the current as if sensing something unseen. The glow soon revealed its source, a cavern mouth yawning open in the stone. It was perfectly round, like the gullet of some vast beast, the rock lined with jagged ridges that looked disturbingly like teeth. From its depths came a low, wet rumble, and a slow pulse of light, as if the cavern were breathing. Ajani's voice was low and urgent. "This is the river maw. The guardian inside will not let us pass without a challenge." Sefu's tail flicked uneasily. What kind of guardian? Ajani's eyes flickered to Tay, then to Naima. The kind that knows your soul. The words hung heavy between them. Tay stepped forward, his feet sinking into the soft silt. The water was warmer here, almost fever-hot, and every ripple felt thick against his skin. We've come this far, he said. We don't turn back now. Naima's snakes hissed softly, their bodies coiling tighter against her scalp. You speak as if you've already survived what waits beyond. Do you even know what it means to face them all? Tay met her gaze without flinching. I know it means we don't get to choose the battlefield. But we do get to choose how we face it. A slow smile curved her lips, not of mockery, but of something closer to reluctant respect. Ajani moved to the mouth of the cavern, pressing his head low in a gesture of reverence. Guardian of the Maw, he called into the darkness, we seek passage. Test us, if you must, but let the worthy pass. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the cavern seemed to shudder. The rumble deepened into a sound like grinding stone. From the blackness emerged a shape, first a long, segmented body plated in bone-white armor, then a head crowned with jagged spines. Its eyes were lidless and pale, glowing faintly, and its mouth split open in a grin far too wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. The Guardian's voice slid into their minds rather than the water around them. 3 truths must be spoken. One from the past, one from the present, one from the heart. Fail, and you are swallowed. The current pressed in, urging them forward. Ajani was first. His voice was deep, steady. From the past, I was born of Naima's blood, but I have never called her mother. That is my truth. The Guardian's pale eyes turned toward him, and with a slow nod, it shifted its gaze to Sefu. She lifted her chin. From the present, I guard the kingdom not because I love it, but because it is my burden. The red glow pulsed once, as if approving. Then the Guardian's eyes fixed on Tay. He swallowed, the weight of the moment pressing hard. His mind flashed to his visions in the current, his father's accusing eyes, the floodwaters, Naima's grief. From the heart, he said slowly, I came here to kill the Serpent Queen. But I no longer know if that is justice or revenge. The cavern went still. The water around them stopped moving entirely, as if holding its breath. Then, slowly, the Guardian's massive jaws closed, and it withdrew into the darkness. You may pass. The current surged forward, carrying them into the glowing red depths. Ahead, the faint outline of an enormous coiled shadow waited, the true source of the curse they had come to face. The current swept them deeper into the glowing heart of the river maw until the stone walls fell away and the water opened into an immense chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, carved by centuries of swirling currents, and from its walls hung curtains of root and vine, pale and ghostly in the crimson light. At the center of the chamber lay a colossal serpent, far larger than Ajani, its coils looping around the stone pillars like living chains. Its scales shimmered dark bronze and deep emerald, catching the glow in shifting waves, and each slow breath sent ripples across the cavern. But its most unsettling feature was its eyes, molten gold, ancient and sorrowful, fixed on Naima the moment she entered. Naima froze, her snakes going utterly still. The water between them seemed to thrum with something heavy and unspoken. The serpent's voice was not a sound, but a vibration that sank straight into their bones. At last, the priestess returns. Tay's heart clenched. Priestess. The word held an intimacy that made his blade feel suddenly small in his hand. Naima's gaze hardened. You call me priestess as if you remember me kindly. But I remember nothing of you. The serpent's great head lowered until its eyes were level with hers. Because the goddess stole your memories before she cast you out. I am not your enemy, Naima. I am your other half. Ajani's coils shifted uneasily. Other half. Yes, the serpent rumbled. When Baju touched you, the goddess's curse did more than twist your hair into serpents and your gaze into stone. It tore your spirit in two, one half bound in flesh, the other in scale. I am that half, imprisoned here by Luma's will. The chamber felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. Tay's mind reeled. If what the serpent said was true, Then killing Naima all those years ago hadn't ended her curse, it had only severed the bond further. Naima's lips parted, her voice raw. You mean, all this time, the rage, the hunger, it wasn't wholly mine? The serpent's eyes softened. It was ours. Shared. But apart, we are unstable, dangerous. The goddess feared what we might become together. Sephiu's voice trembled like a harp string. If you are reunited, what happens to the kingdom? The serpent's gaze swept over them all, lingering on Tay. That depends on your hunter. He holds the blade that can destroy us both, or cut the curse's knot and make us one again. The volcanic glass in Tay's grip suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 stones. His mouth was dry. And if I make you one? Naima stepped forward, the glow catching on her snake's scales. Then the goddess's judgment will fall on all of us. For a long heartbeat, no one spoke. The chamber's red light pulsed like a living heartbeat, and the water hummed with tension. Tay realized he stood on the edge of a choice that could change the river forever, and perhaps destroy Kambusa in the process. Behind him, Ajani whispered, "Hunter, choose wisely." The serpent's golden eyes gleamed. "So, will you kill me, Hunter? Or will you set us free?" The chamber felt as if it were holding its breath. The current had gone eerily still, the roots hanging from the ceiling swayed only slightly, and the red glow from the stone heart in the center of the river's belly pulsed slow and deep. Tay stood at the water's edge, the volcanic glass blade heavy in his palm. His reflection wavered on the dark surface, not the face of a young hunter anymore, but that of a man carrying the weight of a kingdom's fate in his eyes. Naima's snake hissed softly, restless, sensing her pulse quicken. She stared at Tay, her expression unreadable, though deep inside her chest, something pulled at her, a longing she didn't understand, an ache that went beyond the curse. The great serpent coiled slowly, its immense body sliding against stone with a sound like shifting mountains. The goddess fears us, Hunter. That is why she tore us apart. But she is not here now. You hold the power to decide whether we remain broken or become whole. Ajani moved closer to Tay's side, the glowing lines along his scales flickering in agitation. And you also hold the power to save the kingdom. Remember the floods, the drowned fields, the families who cannot return to their homes. Sephiu's voice was softer, almost pleading. If the serpent speaks truth, making them one might stop the floods too. The curse feeds on division. Tay's knuckles tightened around the blade. Or it could make something far worse than either of them alone, he muttered. The serpent's golden eyes locked with his. You know the goddess, Hunter. She punishes without mercy, hides the truth to keep her dominion. Ask yourself, who truly benefits from our suffering? Naima finally spoke, her voice low, almost trembling. Tay, if there is even a chance I am not the monster they made me out to be. I want to know. Even if it means the goddess's wrath. Tay felt his heart twist. He remembered the look in her eyes when they had fought, not just rage, but pain, centuries of it, trapped and festering. And he thought of the elders' warnings, the way they never spoke of the curse's origin in full. The mirror shield strapped to his back seemed to hum faintly, as if urging him to reflect before striking. Ajani's tail flicked the water. This is reckless. If you fail, no charm will save you. Maybe, Tay said quietly. His gaze moved from Naima to the serpent, then to the blade in his hand. The silence in the chamber was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. Then, with a slow, deliberate breath, Tay sheathed the blade at his side. I'm not here to be the goddess's executioner, he said. If the curse was built on a lie, then I'll face the truth. Whatever it is. The serpent's head dipped in approval. Then come, Hunter. Stand between us. Naima waded forward until the water lapped at her waist, the serpent lowering its massive head to mirror her movement. Tay stepped between them, placing one hand on Naima's shoulder, the other on the serpent's warm, ridged brow. The red glow from the heartstone flared brighter, the water surging around them. A deep vibration rolled through the chamber, not a sound, but a pulse in the very bones of the earth. Naima gasped as a flood of images and sensations tore through her mind, memories of her life before the curse, of tending Luma's temple, of laughter and music, of Baju's eyes glinting under moonlight, and of a moment when light and shadow pulled her soul apart. The serpent's voice roared inside her skull, "Now, priestess, remember." The light swelled until the entire chamber was drowned in it. And then, everything shattered. When the light faded, Naima was no longer standing in the serpent's lair. She stood barefoot on warm river sand under a moon so full it seemed to spill silver milk across the water. The air was sweet with the scent of night-blooming flowers, and the soft rush of the Oba River was gentler here, like a lullaby. Her snakes were gone. Her hair was the way it had once been, thick, black, threaded with shells, warm against her back. Her skin glowed with youth, her heart beat with innocence. The scene around her rippled, as if it were alive. She recognized this place instantly, the sacred bend of the Oba where she had prayed 100 times before. But this was not memory as she had always remembered it. This was sharper, brighter, deeper. "It is not a dream, priestess," the serpent's voice echoed from nowhere. "It is the truth you were denied." She saw herself, the younger Nia, kneeling by the water, offering palm wine and white kola nuts to Luma's altar stone. Her lips moved in prayer, though Naima could not hear the words. Then, from the water, he emerged. Baju. His hair dripped riverweed, his bronze skin glistened like wet stone, and his eyes, God's, those eyes, carried the weight of storms. Naima felt her own breath hitch, even though this was only a vision. She watched the younger Nia smile in surprise, and Baju smile back, a smile full of longing. He knelt beside her, fingers brushing hers as he took a kola nut. His voice was low, hesitant, reverent. "You tend her altar as if it were your own heart." "It is," young Nia replied softly. "The river is life. Without Luma's blessing, we are nothing." Baju's smile faltered. "Without Luma's permission, you mean?" Naima felt the air shift. She had forgotten these words, these warnings. The goddess's shadow seemed to stretch across the river as Baju leaned closer. "What would you say, priestess, if I told you Luma's blessing is not hers alone to give? That there was a time when the Oba belonged to more than one god?" Young Nia frowned. "Such talk is dangerous. Truth is always dangerous." His gaze softened. "But I came not to speak of gods tonight. I came to speak of you." The river breeze cooled, but Naima felt heat rising in her chest. She remembered what came next, or thought she did. The Elder's version said Baju came in force, took what was not freely given. But here, the truth bloomed differently. She watched her younger self falter, torn between fear and fascination. She saw how Baju's touch was careful at first, his thumb brushing over her palm, his voice trembling as he asked if he might kiss her. And she saw herself, nod. The kiss was slow, searching. The river shimmered around them, as if it too had drawn closer. When he finally pulled away, there was no violence in his eyes, only devotion and fear. "Luma will not forgive this," Baju whispered. "She will not know," Nia murmured. But even as she spoke, the water behind them darkened. The vision split like lightning, one moment the moonlit river, the next the temple's inner sanctum, where Luma herself stood, her beauty terrible to behold. Her robe was woven from threads of pure water, her crown a living halo of foam. But her eyes were cold as the deep. "You dare," the goddess hissed, "to claim what is mine." Naima felt her younger self drop to her knees. "Goddess, please, I..." "Silence. Your choice has stained my waters. I cannot unmake the spirit, but you." Luma's hand sliced the air, and pain like molten metal exploded in Nia's skull. Her hair writhed. Her skin chilled to stone. Her cry became a hiss. Through the haze of agony, she heard Baju roar her name. But the goddess hurled him into the depths, shackled in currents he could not break. "You will be Naima," Luma decreed, her voice ringing like iron. "Serpent-haired queen. You will walk the mangrove swamps until your name is feared and your beauty forgotten. And when they come to kill you, they will believe it justice." The vision shuddered and collapsed. Naima fell to her knees, back in the serpent's chamber, gasping, clutching her head as the snakes thrashed wildly. The serpent's great body loomed over her. "Now you see, Priestess. Now you remember." Tay's face was pale, his grip on the volcanic blade tight. "The goddess lied to all of us." Naima's voice was low, shaking with rage. "She cursed me for love, not for sin." The water trembled around them, as if the Oba itself had heard her. Somewhere far above, thunder cracked. The thunder rolled again, deeper this time, as if the river's very bones were groaning. A low tremor shivered through the serpent's lair, sending ripples racing across the black water. The air thickened until every breath tasted like rain about to break. Naima stood slowly, the weight of her restored memory pressing on her like armor. Her snakes hissed in agitation, tasting the charged air. The fury in her eyes was no longer cold, it burned. "She took my life," Naima said, voice steady but sharp as obsidian. "And buried the truth so deep that even I believed her lies." She turned to Tay. "If we do nothing, she will take yours too, and then she will take the river itself." Tay swallowed hard. "If she hears us now." "She already hears you," a voice like rushing water answered. The lair exploded with light. Not the gentle silver of moonlight, nor the warm gold of sunrise, but a crushing, liquid radiance, as though the surface of the river had been dragged down into this chamber and made to shine. From the ceiling of water, she descended. Luma. Her form was immense, towering over them, her robe a cascade of endless current, her hair flowing in rivulets that shifted and coiled like living streams. Every movement spilled droplets that hissed into steam upon touching the serpent stones. Her eyes were not merely cold this time, they were fathomless, twin abysses of judgment. "Naima," the goddess said, her voice carrying the hiss of breaking waves. "I see you have found your past, and chosen to cling to it like a fool clings to driftwood." Naima stepped forward, unflinching. "I found the truth. You cursed me not for desecration, but for defiance. You punished love because it did not bow to you." Luma's gaze flicked toward Tay, then the serpent. "And now you gather mortals and beasts to your side, thinking you can face me." She laughed, and the sound was like a waterfall smashing stone. "The river runs because I will it. Life endures here because I permit it." The serpent shifted, his coils tightening protectively around Naima and Tay. "And yet you fear them enough to come yourself." A muscle twitched in Luma's jaw. The water in the chamber surged upward, swirling into whirlpools that threatened to drag them under. "I fear nothing," she said, "but I will not allow corruption to fester in my domain." Naima's snakes rose high, their scales glinting like wet emerald. "Then strike me now. Or listen." For the briefest moment, Luma hesitated. Thunder cracked above again, but this time, it was closer, as if the storm had sunk into the earth itself. Tay took a bold step forward. "If the river is truly yours, then prove it by hearing the voices of those who drink from it. You rule through fear, not reverence. That is why your temples are silent, and your altars grow moss." The goddess's eyes narrowed, but she did not deny his words. Naima pressed on, her voice cutting through the roaring water. "Lift the curse, Luma. Free Baju. Return what you stole from both of us. Do this, and I will kneel before you once more, not as a slave, but as your chosen." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the water around them began to rise, forming a towering wall that encircled them completely. Within it, shapes moved, faces of drowned warriors, the eyes of ancient spirits, the shadows of creatures no mortal had named. The goddess's voice boomed from all directions. "If you seek to challenge me, Naima, you will do so in the heart of my power." The wall of water crashed inward, swallowing them whole. Naima felt herself dragged upward through a roaring column, her lungs burning, her snake snapping at the current. The serpent coiled tight around her waist, Tay's hand locked on her wrist. Above them, the surface split into blinding light. They broke through into a place that was not river, not land, a sky made of water, where the horizon bent and the air shimmered like liquid glass. And there, in the center of this impossible realm, stood a throne of coral and bone. Luma sat upon it, one hand resting on a trident taller than any man, her gaze fixed on them with the stillness of a storm before it strikes. "Welcome," she said softly, "to the deep court. Here, I am not bound by mortal eyes, and neither are my judgments." The serpent hissed low. "We may not leave here alive." Naima's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Then we make sure she doesn't leave unchanged." The water in this strange realm had no true surface, no true floor. It was as though the world had been turned inside out, sky replaced by a vast dome of rippling blue, ground replaced by a slow-rolling ocean beneath their feet. Every step Naima took felt both solid and liquid, as if the water itself chose to hold her up. All around, shadowy shapes drifted, colossal fish with eyes like lanterns, serpentine eels braided with gold, and drifting figures whose bodies were little more than mist and bone. They were the Baju, the river's oldest spirits, called to witness whatever trial Luma intended. Some bore spears carved from petrified coral, others floated weightlessly, watching with eyeless faces. At the center, the throne of coral and bone pulsed faintly, alive in some way that made Naima's skin crawl. Luma sat upon it as if she had always been there, her robe spilling endlessly into the water, forming waves that lapped outward in slow, deliberate breaths. "You stand accused," the goddess began, her voice low but resonant, carrying through the court without echo. "Of breaking the sacred bond between guardian and goddess. Of blasphemy. Of consorting with a mortal in defiance of my law." Her eyes cut to Tay like a knife. "And of dragging yet another into your rebellion." Naima did not flinch. "I stand accused of loving beyond the boundaries you drew to keep yourself adored and unchallenged." The spirits murmured. Some tilted their heads, others hissed softly. "Your words are bold," Luma said, "but they are air. In the deep court, truth is not spoken, it is shown." She lifted her trident and struck it once against the coral floor. The water before them twisted and condensed into a floating sphere, a memory orb, shimmering like a captive moon. Within it, scenes began to take shape, the village before Naima's curse, her laughter with Baju on the riverbank, the moment they stole away from the others to sit beneath the silk cotton tree. Naima reached out instinctively, but the images shifted. The sphere darkened. The night of Luma's arrival appeared, the unnatural stillness of the river, the way the goddess's shadow swallowed the moonlight. They all watched as Naima knelt in reverence, and then recoiled when Luma's voice demanded she renounce Baju. The memory played out like fire across dry grass. Naima refused. Baju stepped forward, and Luma's eyes flashed with something that was not merely anger, it was possession. The water surged, the curse fell, and Baju vanished beneath the waves. The orb dissolved, leaving silence so heavy it almost felt physical. Luma's voice was soft when she spoke, but every word carried iron. "Love blinds mortals. Guardians must be above such weakness. That is why the bond between mortal and immortal is forbidden. You broke that covenant." Naima's snakes hissed violently, the sound like leaves in a sudden wind. "No, I broke your chains." The serpent beside her uncoiled slightly, his voice deep and echoing. "If this is to be a trial, where is the other voice? Where is the one she loved?" Luma's gaze darkened. "He cannot return." The water around them stirred, the deep shadows below twisting. From the abyss, a figure began to rise, slow, as if each movement tore him from centuries of stillness. His hair floated like river weeds, his skin pale from years away from the sun, and his eyes. Naima's heart stuttered. Baju. He stepped onto the strange water floor with unsteady grace, as though unsure if he was awake. The spirits parted for him without sound. His gaze found Naima's instantly, recognition and pain flashing like lightning across his face. Luma leaned back in her throne. "The court will hear the one whose fate was sealed with yours." Naima wanted to run to him, but the serpent's tail pressed gently against her hip, a warning. This was still Luma's domain. Baju's voice was quiet, almost hoarse. "If you want truth, goddess, I will give it to you. But you may not like how it sounds." A few of the elder spirits shifted in anticipation. One murmured in a voice like cracking reeds, "The drowned speaks." Naima's pulse raced. Whatever Baju said next could sway the court, or doom them both forever. The stillness in the deep court felt alive, like a great beast holding its breath. Even the drifting leviathans in the distance had stilled, their glowing eyes fixed on the men who had been gone for years. Baju stood in the impossible water floor, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. Time had altered him. His frame was leaner, the muscles carved by currents rather than by work in the fields. His skin bore faint marks like silver threads, gifts or scars from the deep. But it was his eyes, bright as sunlit shallows yet shadowed with grief, that made the spirits lean in. He looked at Naima first, and in that gaze was every untold word, every year stolen from them. Then he turned to Luma. "You call her disloyal," Baju began, voice steady despite the weight in the air. "You call her weak for loving. But I was there, goddess. I remember what you did. You did not curse her for disobedience. You cursed her because she was loved more than you." A ripple went through the gathered Ebidu. Some hissed at his boldness, others murmured low approval. Luma's trident twitched in her hand, though her face remained carved from stone. "Mind your words, mortal." "I will," Baju said, stepping forward until the faint glow of the coral throne lit his features. "The people of our village prayed to the river for generations, but they did not fear you, not until you demanded fear. Naima did her duty. She made the offerings. She led the songs. And then I came. And she smiled more at me than she ever bowed to you." Naima's breath caught. Every word was a knife, but each knife cut Luma, not her. Baju's voice gained strength, resonating like a drumbeat under deep water. "When you saw her joy, you wanted it for yourself. You didn't want a guardian who would serve the people. You wanted a guardian who would serve you alone. When she refused, you did not punish her for breaking law, you punished her for choosing love over worship." The great serpent at Naima's side lowered his head, a hiss curling from his fangs in approval. One of the oldest spirits, a skeletal figure draped in river moss, spoke from the edge of the circle. "Is this true, daughter of the deep? Was the covenant broken, or was it remade in your image?" Luma's eyes flashed dangerously. "You presume to question me in my own court." Another spirit answered, voice like flowing silt, "This court does not belong to you. It belongs to the river, and the river remembers." Naima felt the current change, a subtle pull, like the first turning of a tide. The weight of absolute control was slipping from Luma's grasp. Baju's final words landed like a stone dropped into still water. "If loving Naima was a crime, then I am guilty. If loving me was a crime, then she is guilty. But that crime was never against the river, only against your pride." The silence that followed was not empty, it was heavy with shifting allegiances. The Ebidu were no longer merely witnesses, they were judging. Luma rose slowly from her throne, her robe spilling outward like a cloud of ink in water. "Very well," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "If you wish the truth, then you will have all of it. Let the hidden law be spoken, and let the consequences drown you both." The water above them darkened as if something vast had swum between them and the light. A low, ancient hum vibrated through the deep court, and Naima knew the next moment could decide whether they left alive, or as whispers in the current. The hum deepened, reverberating through Naima's bones until her teeth ached. The deep court shivered like the river itself was listening, waiting. From above, the darkness lowered, not a shadow, but a presence. Naima caught a glimpse of scales the size of boats, a single golden eye staring down from the deep black ceiling of water. She realized this was no spirit she had seen before. This was older. Vast. Luma lifted her chin and spread her hands. "Great One, witness. Let the covenant be spoken in your hearing." The golden eye narrowed. Its voice, when it came, was not in words but in the slow, crushing weight of meaning, "Speak truth, or be unmade." Luma did not flinch. "Long before my throne, before even the first Ebidu sang the river's name, there was a law. No mortal and guardian may join in love, for love binds more tightly than duty. When love is given, the guardian's strength flows to the mortal. And when that mortal dies, the river loses that strength forever." The gathered spirits shifted uneasily. Naima felt her heart pound against her ribs. The words struck her like a stone dropped into her mind, she understood now. This wasn't just jealousy. Luma's eyes bored into Naima's. You thought your curse was born from spite. But no. It was the only way to keep the river from losing you. If you had stayed with him as you were, your power would have bled away into his veins. You would have died, and with you, the protection of 3 villages. So I made you eternal, but alone. Naima's voice was raw when she spoke. You call that mercy? You didn't save me, you chained me to the depths. You still breathe, Luma replied coldly. He would have stolen that breath from you without knowing it. Baju's hands clenched. You twist the truth. You speak as though love is theft, as though I would take from her what I could never replace. The golden eye turned to him, and Naima felt the weight of its regard like the drag of a riptide. Mortal, if you love her still, will you bear the binding instead? Baju frowned. Binding. Luma's gaze sharpened, but she said nothing. It was the golden voice that answered, a mortal who takes the guardian's bond into themselves becomes tethered to the river forever. No land, no sky, no freedom from its pull. Your life will stretch long as hers, but your soul will be the river's until the last tide falls. Baju looked at Naima. She could see the question in his eyes, the same question she once asked herself in 100 quiet moments, is love worth everything it takes from you? The court was silent, currents curling in slow spirals around them. Naima shook her head slightly. Baju, don't. But his voice was steady. If it means we walk the same shore, swim the same current, and never lose each other again, then I will. The golden presence rumbled, and the deep court shifted as though an unseen hand had stirred the waters. Luma's voice, low and sharp, cut through. Then so be it. But once bound, you will serve. Both of you. Until the river has no need of you, or the tide ends the world. Naima realized too late that this mercy was not release. It was the beginning of another kind of chain. The great eye closed, and the current pulled them closer together. She felt the cold touch of something ancient wrap around her heart, and around his. The deep court dimmed until it felt like they were suspended in the belly of night. Only the single golden eye glowed faintly above them, its pupil a black void that seemed to swallow time itself. A current like slow-moving fire coiled around Naima and Baju, twining their bodies in a spiraling dance. Luma stepped forward, her voice a measured chant that thrummed against the walls of the court. By the first flood, by the blood of the moon, by the songs sung before the world had a sky, let the river take what it claims. From the shadows, spirits began to emerge, long-limbed guardians with translucent skin, their veins pulsing with starlight. They formed a circle around the pair, their hands lifted, fingers splayed, weaving unseen threads into the water. Every gesture sent a pulse of power that Naima felt in her chest, as if the river were trying to write its name into her heart. The golden voice spoke without sound, pressing into their minds, this bond is not a promise, it is a chain of breath and soul. You will draw life from the same tide. You will not die while the other breathes, nor live free while the other is bound. Baju's hand tightened around hers. She wanted to tell him to let go, to save himself. But his grip was steady, a quiet defiance against the crushing immensity of the moment. The currents thickened, wrapping their legs, their waists, their chests. Cold spread through Naima's bones until it met the heat of Baju's touch, and then that heat spread through her, knotting itself into her spirit. She felt his heartbeat echoing against hers, the two rhythms slowly aligning until there was no difference between them. A spirit stepped forward, carrying a basin carved from moonstone. In it swirled black water shot through with threads of silver. Luma dipped her hand into it, lifting a single drop between her fingers. Drink, she commanded. Naima hesitated, but Baju lifted the drop to her lips before tasting it himself. It was not like water, it was like swallowing a storm. She could feel the river rushing through her, every tributary and hidden spring, every secret eddy, every drowned song. And beneath it all, she felt him, tethered to her as surely as her own shadow. Then the golden presence deepened its tone, shaking the silt from the floor of the court. It is done. The circle of spirits lowered their hands. The currents loosened, but did not vanish. They had settled beneath their skin now, a constant pull, a living tether. Naima tried to take a step back, but her body moved only when his did. It was like their souls had been sewn together with invisible thread. Luma's gaze was unreadable. You chose this, mortal. Remember that love will not save you from the river's call. But even as she spoke, Naima noticed something, a faint vibration in the water, a sound almost too low to hear. It wasn't coming from the court. It was coming from deeper below, from a place northwest one in the court dared to look toward. The golden eye shifted slightly, and for the first time, Naima thought she saw unease in it. Something had been awakened by the binding. And whatever it was rising. The ceremony's echoes had barely faded when the water around the deep court changed. It was subtle at first, an odd trembling in the currents, like a drumbeat muffled by sand. But then it grew, rolling in slow, heavy pulses that made the coral spires shiver and sent ripples through the schools of silverfish drifting along the court's edges. Naima felt it before she understood it. The bond in her chest, this strange new tide that was now part of her, began to hum with something alien. It wasn't Baju's heartbeat. It wasn't the river's natural song. This was deeper, older, and far less patient. The golden eye above them narrowed slightly, its light dimming as though in thought. For the first time since Naima had entered the court, she heard the faintest crack in its eternal calm. It should not be awake, the voice murmured, not to them, but to itself. Luma's face tightened. The womb below, she said, almost spitting the words, as if naming it might draw it closer. The thing that sleeps beneath the first trench. It stirs only when the river's balance is broken, or when something it desires is brought into its reach. Baju's hand found hers, their fingers still laced from the binding. And what could it want with us? The current answered for her. From the darkness below the court's floor, a shadow began to take form, vast, shapeless at first, then coiling like smoke into a suggestion of limbs, eyes, and teeth. The water pressure rose so suddenly Naima's ears rang, the spirits in the circle staggered, their glow flickering. One of them cried out in a voice like snapping reeds. It knows the bond has been made. It will seek the chain and follow it to the heart. Naima's stomach turned cold. The chain, she realized they weren't just bound to each other. They were now bound to the river's deepest essence, and if this thing could follow the tether, it could reach her wherever she fled. The golden eye flared suddenly, flooding the court with searing light. The shadow below hissed, withdrawing slightly, but it didn't vanish. The voice thundered, "Back to your prison, sleeper. This vessel is not for you." The darkness recoiled, curling upon itself like a dying wave, but Naima sensed its retreat was not surrender. It was memorizing her. Measuring her. Waiting for its chance. When the glow faded, the court was still, but not at peace. The spirits whispered among themselves, their faces pale. Luma approached, her expression tight. The womb below does not rise without reason. It may hunger for your bond, or the power you will yet grow into. Either way, you will not be safe in these waters for long. Naima felt Baju's pulse through their link, fast, restless, but steady. Whatever had woken in the abyss had marked them both. And now, in the space between her own heartbeat and his, she thought she heard it again, the faint, patient thrum of something waiting in the dark. Somewhere far below, the sleeper smiled. The golden light above the court dimmed to a gentle, watchful glow, yet the tension in the water clung like a heavy mist. The memory of the shadow still seemed to press against Naima's skin, as if the sleeper's gaze had followed her from the depths. The spirits had drawn back into a wide circle, their luminescence dulled, their whispers now threads of urgency. Luma swam forward until she stood in the space between Naima, Baju, and the throne of light. Her braids floated in the slow current, beads clicking like warning stones. The sleepers stirring as a sign of fracture, she began, her voice sharp but controlled. The bond you share has touched the river's root. That root runs deeper than even the gods reach. It is a cord the sleeper can climb. An elder spirit drifted closer, its form long and eel-like, face as wrinkled as carved driftwood. We must sever the bond before it grows. Once it matures, nothing in the deep will hide you from it. Baju stiffened, his grip tightening on Naima's hand. No. This bond is not a mistake, it was made by the river itself. To cut it would be to reject what was destined. Another voice, this one low and measured, spoke from behind them. Destiny is a tide, young one. It carries you, but it also drowns. The speaker emerged from the dim, a broad-shouldered merman with skin the shade of obsidian coral, scars running along his arms like lightning frozen in flesh. He inclined his head toward Naima. The sleeper has hunted before. You would not be the first to be claimed. The golden eye's voice filled the court, deep enough to shake the sand underfoot. The choice is not mine alone. The river moves as it wills, but the two bound must choose their path. Stay here, and you may learn the full measure of your chain, perhaps strong enough to anchor the sleeper in its pit. Leave, and you may keep ahead of it, for a while. Naima looked at Baju. His jaw was set, eyes burning with a defiance that mirrored the thrum in her own chest. Yet beneath that defiance, she felt the truth through their bond, fear, not for himself, but for her. Luma broke the silence. If you stay, you will face trials older than kingdoms. The river's heart will not yield its power without a price. And if you leave, she paused, the beads in her hair clicking softly. If you leave, you must vanish beyond the sleeper's reach, into currents even we cannot follow. You will be alone. The circle of spirits waited. The golden eye pulsed faintly, as if holding its breath. Naima inhaled slowly, the water filling her lungs like a cool weight. The bond thrummed between her and Baju, no longer a mere thread, it was a tide of its own, pulling her toward something vast. She turned to him, her voice quiet but steady. If we run, it will follow. If we stay, it may kill us. But if we face it here, maybe we end it. Baju searched her face, then nodded once, firmly. We stay. The golden eye's light swelled until the court gleamed like molten gold. So be it. The trials of the river will be set. Survive them, and the sleeper will know fear for the first time. Far below, in the cold abyss, something shifted in answer. Not fear, but interest. The golden light in the deep court dimmed, folding into narrow streams that poured down toward the riverbed like molten threads. The throne dissolved into ripples, and from the vast emptiness beneath it rose three massive stone pillars, each carved with swirling patterns that seemed to move when one looked too long. The golden eye's voice came like the slow roll of thunder through deep water. The river will test you in 3 trials. The first, a pause, and the water itself seemed to tremble, will show whether your hearts can carry the weight of what is to come. A cold current swept through the court, stirring Naima's braids and drawing the warmth from her skin. The pillars shifted, and within the central one a doorway formed, round and dark, framed by glyphs glowing faint green. As Naima stared into it, the darkness moved, becoming the outline of a figure. Her breath caught. It was her mother. Not as she had last seen her, sick and fading, but young and radiant, skin dusted with gold powder, eyes filled with the warmth Naima had always longed for. The sight pierced through every layer of strength she had built. Baju stepped forward, frowning. This is a trick. Luma's voice came sharp and low from the edge of the circle. It is more than that. The river will bend memory and longing to its will. If you step into that gate unprepared, you will not return. The figure of Naima's mother raised a hand. Child, come. Her voice was exactly as Naima remembered, soft, lilting, full of comfort. The water between them shimmered with the ache of home. Baju's hand found hers. If you go, I go. The golden eye's light dimmed further. That choice may be your undoing. In the first trial, one must carry the weight, and the other must bear the loss. The court fell utterly silent, the surrounding spirits watching without blinking. Naima's mind spun. This was not merely a test of courage, but of their bond's ability to survive separation. She turned to Baju, her chest tightening. If I send you, and you don't return. He shook his head. And if I send you, I can't lose you either. The voice of the golden eye deepened, final and cold. Decide now. The gate will not wait. Choose who enters, and who remains. The one who stays will feel every heartbeat the other spends inside. And if the heart stops... The unfinished sentence pressed like a weight on Naima's spine. The green glyphs flared, the figure of her mother smiling gently as though nothing in the world could harm her. Naima's hand tightened on Baju's. One choice, and the first trial would begin. And somewhere far below, in the dark beyond the court's reach, the sleeper shifted again, listening.